Welcome, everyone, to Harlem Speaks, the flagship series of the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. My name is Greg Thomas. I'm co-producer of the series, and on behalf of Executive Director Loren Schoenberg and co-executive director Christian McBride, I'd like to welcome you. Hold on. You got to make a grand entrance. Man.
I thought.
Welcome you to our interview, our conversation today, featuring an alto saxophonist and composer and leader who is one of the most important musicians on the scene today and has been for the last quarter century, as you will hear tonight. And I'm talking about none other than Mr. Steve Coleman. Make your grand entrance now.
It's okay to bring tea?
Absolutely, man.
Absolutely.
I just wanted you to have your grand entrance, that's all. Yeah. So welcome.
How you doing?
All right, man. All right. This is actually the second time that I recall you being here. We had a discussion among jazz critics and jazz musicians, and Steve was a very key, essential part of that discussion. And I'm really happy, and it's been actually a long time coming because I wanted you to be here to be able to tell us about your life and career, and your ideas about music, about life, about how all of that relates to philosophy and spirituality. But let's start at the very beginning, chronologically. Where and when were you born?
You mean the year, date, everything?
Sure.
September 20th, 1956 in Chicago, Illinois.
All right.
On the south side. I grew up on the south side and spent all of my developing years there. Well, I could skip a lot of that, but I went to school at a place called South Shore High School. That's where I started playing music.
Okay.
In high school. And after that, I went to...
Wait, now you're going fast.
Yeah, I'm going real fast.
You're going fast. I mean, we do need to get into some of the early years because the formative years are important, you know. So let me just ask you a couple questions about that.
Okay.
So you were born south side Chicago. Tell us about your parents, their names.
Well, my father's name was Earl Coleman. My mother, Wilma Coleman. It's not a musical family. Nobody in the family was a musician except me.
Okay.
But my father loved music, and he saw all the greats in his day. He was like a real hip cat, so he followed everybody around, you know. And he'd tell me stories about everybody, about Charlie Parker, about, you know, Ben Webster and Duke Ellington and Billie Holiday and Ray Charles and just everybody he saw. You know, he was into like the whole spectrum of music. He wasn't into the straight, the Delta blues too much. There's a lot of that in Chicago. You know, I had to go search that out myself as I got older.
Coming from Mississippi.
Yeah. Like, you know, guys like Buddy Guy, Junior Wells, all those kind of people. They were playing like every week. You know, and I searched some of that out myself later, but he knew about all the like horn players and singers and people like that, doing what most people call jazz. You know, I just called it music at the time.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I called it old people's music because that was the music that the older people were listening to. You know?
Right. Okay.
And now I'm old, so but he saw all those people, you know, firsthand. And so he would tell me all the stories and everything. In particular, he was into Charlie Parker. You know? And whenever Bird came to town, like he was there, you know, on top of it. And you know, of course, everybody around Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, all those people, you know. So he was familiar with all of that. And so I heard a lot of that in the house early on. You know, I remember hearing, you know, Dinah Washington singing "What a Difference a Day Makes" and all this kind of stuff, you know, like in the house before I even knew what it was.
Right.
I just remembered the sounds. And then later on when I learned the songs, I knew some of those songs already. And I was like, man, how do I know this? And I realized I knew it from just, you know, my mother and father playing the music earlier, you know. So it made a big impression on me, although at the time I wasn't thinking about it. It was sort of sinking. It's just osmosis, you know.
Right.
And
your brothers and sisters?
Yeah, 2 brothers, 2 sisters.
Okay.
None of them in the music, you know.
Okay.
When I came home with my first instrument, you know, everybody sort of freaked out, because I came home with this violin and started making noise in the house, and the dog started squealing and everybody,
How old were you?
So, 14 at the time. And then the next thing I did, 6 months later, I came home with a saxophone, and my mother was like, "Oh man, this is even louder than the first instrument,"
Right.
And when you start off on saxophone, you just honking,
Right.
it sounds like, sounds pretty bad.
Squeaks and this
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that.
And so, I was just making a lot of noise and going around the house making a lot of noise and everything. My father was like, let him go, let him go, let him,
Okay.
do what he's gonna do. And so,
So you actually started playing. If you were born in '56 and you started at 14, then it was
1970.
1970.
1970,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And so from 70 to about 74, I was just learning like the very basics of the instruments. I wasn't getting into improvisation or anything, although my teacher, he had studied with this guy named Captain Walter Diet, who was like a kind of a legendary figure in Chicago,
Definitely.
And he was the cat that like all of the older guys came out of his high school,
Right.
some kind of way. They all either tried to go there, whether they were from that district or not.
What high school was that?
It was called DuSable.
DuSable, right?
Yeah, and
Right.
and so
What was the name of your teacher though?
his name was Alvin Lawson.
Okay.
But he went to DuSable.
Okay.
And my mother went to DuSable. There was a connection, and my mother's brother, he played clarinet, my uncle. So he was under Walter Diet,
Okay.
And also just a whole bunch of people who were connected to my family. Anybody who was musicians, they came up under this guy. This guy was a real disciplinarian, and a lot of people, Gene Ammons, Von Freeman, Richard Davis, Muhal, Richard Abrams. The list goes on and on. A lot of these people all went through the same cat, and so that was a big thing, and it was a big tradition in Chicago. It was a really big thing,
Right.
and all these people could play. So we knew it was something about the method. So my high school teacher, he used to talk about the guy a lot. We didn't know who he was talking about because we had no idea who he was,
Right.
But he was always like Walter Diet this, Walter Diet that, and we were like, who's Walter Diet? And later on, when I started going out to clubs and things like that, I found out that a lot of these guys who I was checking out had went to this school, and I heard the same name again,
Right.
So there was a connection that was, slowly made through, and I realized later on that the teaching method that he was using in high school was the same teaching method that this cat used. He just adopted it to teach us.
Can you describe what that methodology was?
It was just about basics. It wasn't about
Fundamental.
Yeah, it wasn't about improvisation. It was about like learn all your scales, learn all your keys. It was just like really, really basic stuff. But it was just done in a kind of almost like an army kind of way, a regimented kind of way. If you missed anything or whatever, you'd have to, get up and write your name on the board 1,000,000 times, or put some gum on your nose or whatever.
Are you serious?
Yeah, no. This was back in the days when kids weren't suing anybody. So,
Right.
A teacher could like put his knuckles in your head and nothing would happen. It's like
Right.
would be no court or nothing. You just have a sore head.
Right.
So,
Hey.
so nowadays it's
Sure.
kids that divorce their parents and stuff. It's a different age.
Now, your teacher, was this a teacher you had in school, or this is private?
No, this was in school.
Okay.
Privately, I studied with this guy named Jimmy Ellis, who also went through this system. And Jimmy Ellis, who's still alive today, he also went through this Walter Diet. And what was interesting is that in later years, Jimmy told me that all those guys were Masons, that Walter Diet and all these guys were Masons and everything. And Jimmy himself, he was a Rosicrucian. And so he said that the method that they were teaching was really coming out of that. That's what he told me, like, I don't know, maybe about 6 years ago, 7 years ago, something like
Interesting.
that. I went by his place, and he took me in this back room and showed me all this stuff about Egypt and all this different
Right.
thing. I was like, man, I didn't know you were into all this
I
stuff.
know, right?
He was like, well, you wasn't ready. You weren't ready to know.
Right.
It's like, it's like,
So it's interesting. So it's like a connection between what they would call the mystery school.
yeah, exactly. A
And-
big connection, and I didn't realize it. It was
Look
a
at
big
that.
connection.
Wow.
Not only that, he told me that that Duke and Basie and all these cats were Masons. I mean, Duke was Prince Hall Mason right up here. Was it 155th? Where's the Prince Hall Lodge at?
Yeah, 155th between St. Nicholas and Amsterdam.
Yeah. There was a big connection back then, and Jimmy told me that at that time a lot of black people, the education thing wasn't too happening. So a lot of people went through that system, just for the educational part of it, just for the learning and everything.
Right.
And so there were a lot of people connected to the ones who were intelligent anyway. Were connected to that thing.
Boy, that's an area that's ripe for some research,
Yeah.
for some scholarship. boy.
Yeah, it is, and they had a park, I guess it was called Washington Park or whatever, where these a lot of brothers would get together. It was like a lot of people of different, like would be Muslims and people from the Nation of Islam, and then Black Hebrew Israelites, and some guys were into different kind of things. They would all get together and argue.
In Chicago.
Yeah, and debate and everything. Yeah, Jimmy Ellis told me about this. Muhal Richard Abrams told me about this because they said that when they were little, they used to go there and just listen to these old guys debate and stuff. Wow. So it was a pretty heavy scene, and Chicago was known for like having this like mystery thing underneath, and a lot of people, that come out of that. I mean, well, two streams would be the AACM and Sunrise thing.
Right.
It's like two different, things. A lot of people were into like a lot of different, mystical kind of things.
Being from Chicago, I mean, one of the things about Chicago.
Now I'm talking about the South Side. I just want to make that
I understand.
clear. Okay.
The South Side of Chicago. To be specific.
There is difference. Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, would Bronzeville? What's the name of the section that has been written on? Was it not Bronxville? Bronzeville?
Are you talking about the area?
An area. I think it's part of the South Side of Chicago. But in any event, what would you say it's about Chicago, particularly the South Side of Chicago, that some say, is like quintessential city that epitomizes Black American culture? I mean, I've heard this often. I mean, so either that or just tell us what you think is special about the South Side of Chicago.
Well, I mean, the structure of the city has something to do with it. It was very segregated there when I was growing up. I mean, I didn't know any white people till I was like, 18 or 17 or something like that, except for like seeing policemen and people like that,
Right.
And so it was like really, really, everything that you saw there was this huge area that was just all Black, all African American,
Right.
huge, And there's not like bodies of waters or anything like that like it is in Manhattan, So it's just like this huge flat area that you can go. And as far as you can go, I remember I went there in the early 80s with Doug Hammond. He's a drummer from Florida, So we were driving on the South Side. And so every once in a while he would look up to me and say, "Are we still on the South Side?" He's like, because we'd just be driving and all he saw was Black people, the whole time, So it was like this huge area. And it was, as a kid, you don't really go that far. So that was all I knew. I didn't even know any other thing existed, outside of that.
Right.
And so one of the things is the structure of the city, the size of it. I think in New York, the ethnic areas and stuff, like they're broken up in slices,
Right.
kind of speak. You can go, if you're in Brooklyn, you go so far, and then there's Hasidic Jews, and then you go farther, it's like, West Indians,
Right.
and, it's like pockets, It's not like that in Chicago. It's just this big flat area, So, I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if that's part of it, but I think that's part of it. The other thing is like where it's located. A lot of people came up the river, sort of to speak, from down, people were coming from down south.
Right.
And it was like, there was Chicago, Detroit, these were like the big places where people came up to work and everything, So just a big urban area that there were waves of migrations of people, mainly from down south. Everybody in Chicago is from either they're like from down south, or their parents are from down south, or their grandparents, like in my case,
Right.
So, I mean, there's always some kind of relationship. I guess the same thing happens in New York, too.
Right.
But there's like a real Midwest feel to
Right.
that.
So that Southern Midwest
Exactly. It's
combination.
a different flavor. It's a completely
Right.
different flavor.
You mentioned your grandparents. Where were they from originally? What's their names?
My father's side, my sister just did a family tree, and I don't even know all of it. But George Coleman was my father's name, and his wife's name was Nettie, and they're from Mississippi.
Okay.
My father and mother are both born in Chicago.
Okay.
My mother's side from Florida. On my mother's side of the family, the guy, the movie, The Great Debate.
Yeah.
The young kid that was in that movie, he's related to my mother.
Really?
Yeah, he's her uncle or something like that.
Okay.
I mean, well, not the kid, but
Right.
the guy the kid was playing.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, because my whole family was all excited when that movie came out.
Wiley College, yeah.
They were like calling me saying, you related to them, right? You related to them. I was like, no, I didn't know that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I would tell them, I was like, well, everybody's related to somebody. It's like, But her side of the family is farmers. That's the name of and that's the name of the guy in the movie is Farmer. You know, so that's her side of the family.
Okay.
is
It's so interesting.
farmers.
I think about names and you say farmers. Of course,
Not that they're farmers. Their name is farmers.
I understand.
Yeah, okay.
It's like in jazz, there's Art Farmer.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
I don't know if
yeah.
there's any kind of linkage there.
It might be.
And
It
of
might
course,
be.
in
It
jazz,
might
there's
be.
George Coleman, your granddad.
Yeah,
was
yeah,
named
yeah.
George
Well, he
Coleman.
used to always call me his son. You know, from the time I arrived in New York, he said, "Well, this is my son." I was like,
Right.
you know.
Okay. All right. So, Chicago. I do want to ask you a little more about those formative years, those 4 years of that regiment,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and what that entailed. Okay, so scales, chords, and what about in terms of your sound? Did they have you do like long tones
Yeah,
for
yeah,
days?
long tones. Long tones was the thing. You know, I mean, none of the kids liked to do them, but that was, you know, because we always thought it was boring, you know. But that was the, you know, they would always tell you if you want to get a better tone, you got to do long tones. And we were like, well, long tones is boring. He's like, yeah, but you know, that's what you got to do, you know. And so, you know, that's what we did.
Okay.
We played long tones and everything. Now, what was good about that was that when I first started listening to, you know, when I first tried to learn how to improvise, I was in college at the time, really, and
What college?
Illinois Wesleyan University.
Illinois Wesleyan. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's in the middle of Illinois, Corn Belt,
And the name of the high school?
South Shore High School.
South Shore. Okay.
Yeah, and so I went through my record collection because this teacher there told me you got to learn how to improvise. You know what I mean? And so I was like, oh man, you know, we called it riffing back then. We improvising. That's what we
Okay.
called it, was riffing. You know?
Right.
We knew there were some people who could do it, but we didn't know much about it. And so I went through my record collection, and I had, you know, Stevie Wonder, James Brown, all the regular stuff and everything. And I get to this one record, it's a Charlie Parker record that my father has slipped in. I knew he slipped it in, but I you know,
Hey.
I didn't, you know. And so and I turned over the back, and the first sentence was like, Charles Christopher Parker was a genius of modern improvisation. That was like the first sentence. I still have this record. You know.
Okay.
It was like an album, you know.
All right.
Vinyl. And so,
Yeah, right.
and so I said, oh, a genius. I was like, he must have at least been good. You know, they gonna call the cat a genius.
That's right,
You know?
right.
So I was like, okay, I mean, complete ignorance. You know, I was like, I'll learn from him then.
Now you
know.
were in college.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so you're like 18, 19?
Yeah, 18.
Okay.
18.
Playing for 4 or 5 years at this point.
Yeah, well,
And your father
sort
had,
of playing, yeah.
Okay, I hear you. You're learning the rudiments.
yeah, yeah.
And your father had told you all these stories.
Yeah, but I wasn't listening. See, I'm a very hard-headed cat, you
Okay.
know, and very skeptical. I wasn't really listening. I mean, I heard it. I
Right.
realize now I heard it, you know,
Right.
but at the time I wasn't paying any attention to it because it didn't interest me.
Okay.
You know, but later on, you know, and then as I got into it, of course, my father was still around then, so he was like, I mean, he was like pushing me along. You know, when I first started going out to the clubs and everything, he was pushing me along because at that point he saw that I was hooked, you know,
Okay.
and I was into it. And then he started picking up, telling me the different stories and things like that. Now he wasn't a musician; he couldn't tell me a whole lot musically,
Right.
but he, you know, he could say what he liked and he could sing things. He would be like, you know, just singing. He's like, you know, he'd be singing. You know,
Right.
pictures would be right and everything. And I'd be
Right.
like, okay. He's like, you know, he got together and everything. You know,
Right.
and he, you know, he knew the stuff. You know, but he knew it as a layperson. I think he tried to play saxophone at one point,
Okay.
but it, you know, the war or something, because he was in the army and all that kind of stuff. So he didn't take to it because he was born in 1928.
Oh, wow.
You know, so he was just on the tail end of World War II.
Right.
You know, when he came of age. You know,
Okay.
and so I mean, he just missed it. Really.
Okay.
But he was only 8 years younger than Charlie Parker was. So he was like, right, you know, he said that the guys at his age group, they were the ones that were picking up on this new music. You know,
Okay.
they were the ones that were, he was the same age as like Benny Golson and Sonny Rollins and all
Right.
those guys, you know.
Right.
So they were the ones that were like cueing into the music because the people in Charlie Parker's age group, they didn't really pick up on the stuff.
Right.
You know, it was like the younger people after that. I mean,
Okay.
you know, it takes a while for
Right.
people to get into stuff. And so I just tried to understand what he was doing, but I was glad that I had that foundation with the scales and everything. Before, I didn't know much about chords, but I used the scales and everything to learn about chords. You
So
know?
when you listen to this record, what?
In the beginning, I didn't hear anything. It was just chaos, you know.
Oh, really?
But you know, the way I approached it was the same way we used to approach the R&B records, which was that, you know, we used to take the horn lines off the record, just note by note, and play them, like, you know.
Now with vinyl, of course, and I was at the tail end of vinyl
Yeah,
myself.
you just had to you know.
Well, not only that, you could actually slow it down.
Yeah.
Did you do that?
Yeah, we had record players that went down to 33.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't quite drop down an octave, but that was, you know, those were still happening then because they still had 33 records. I mean, my father had a big collection of records that still played at that speed and everything.
Right.
You know, so they were 30. No, I'm sorry, 16. 33, 16,
Right.
and 45 were
Right.
the 3 speeds.
Right.
You know? I mean, it was like a quarter speeds or something like that.
Right.
You know, but those are the 3 speeds. So we would take the 30, the long play, the LP albums, long
Right.
playing albums, and we'd slow them down to 16.
Right.
And then we take 45s and slow them down to 33.
Right.
You know, because 16 would be too slow.
Now,
And it would sound like, you know.
exactly.
You know.
I remember, I mean, when I was in high school, I played alto.
Uh-huh.
And I got the Charlie Parker Omni book.
Uh-huh.
And
See, there was no Omni book.
yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Was there an Omni book? See, I was blessed because there was an Omni
No
book.
Omni book, no Jamie Aebersold. I mean, not
Scrapple
in the
from the Apple. I'm
beginning.
you know, and that's how I
sound like he's playing baritone.
Right. And I ended up learning it that way. But so you had to really do it by ear.
Yeah, that was it. But they had to do it by ear too.
Right.
You know, I had read that Charlie Parker did this with Lester Young solos, the same thing. So it was like something that had, you know, he was using the record player in the same way. He used to take Lester Young solos
Right.
and slow them down to learn, you know, what was happening. You know, so
Okay.
so it was, you know, this was being done for a while. Plus, I have a tape recorder. I still have it. My mother's brother gave it to me. It was made in 1955. It's like tubes and everything, you know, right before transistors and all that. It's an old reel-to-reel tape recorder, and it had 2 speeds on it. So I would record everything fast, and then flip the switch and slow that down, you know. And that was even better because I mean, it was just I could just tape things.
Right.
So I would lug this thing to like Von Freeman's set or Sonny Stitt or whoever, you know. I mean, it's like a big thing, big metal thing. I still have it.
Oh, wow.
And I would set it up with a mic and everything, and I put it on the table and I would record them, and then during the week between, because the gigs were like every week. And in the week between, I would take it home and learn all the tunes. That's how I learned songs too. You know,
Were they cool with that?
Yeah. They were
Because
cool.
they knew you were playing and you were studying.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wasn't, you know,
Right.
I wasn't, you know, trying to sell things
Right,
or anything
right.
like that. At that point, I was a kid, you know.
Exactly.
But yeah, but the whole point of what I was doing was studying, and then they knew what I was doing. They knew
Right.
I was trying to get together because they could hear me week after week getting a little better and everything. You know.
Okay.
I mean, you know, if I'm gonna take some phrases from you and then, you know, play, I mean, you're gonna know it.
Right,
I mean,
right,
it's like
right,
it's like
right,
you know, you're not
yeah.
gonna. You know, I wasn't that sophisticated that I can hide stuff, so he knew I was copping the stuff. You know,
You talking about Sonny Stitt and Gene Ammons?
Stitt, and I didn't get to see Ammons. You know,
Okay.
I just missed him. He's playing right around the corner from my house, and I just missed him.
Wow.
But I saw Von Freeman.
Ah.
You know, and that was the guy that became my model. He was like, I looked at him like he was my window to the past because he was there all the time. Stitt was like in and out of town. He
Right.
wasn't from Chicago, but Von was there every week. I could hear him. You know, so.
I remember, man, on here in New York, WRVR is now legendary. You know, back in the late 70s, early 80s, before it turned into a country station, and then BGO became. I remember hearing on WRVR Von Freeman play "My One and Only Love," and to this day, that's had an impact on me. And I actually have to find that because it was so powerful. Now, for you, what was it about Von Freeman that really captured you?
Well, for me, what I heard on the record, I don't know how to describe this, but it wasn't real until I saw those guys play. You know, for me, there was always something about it that was not really. I don't know how to describe it. That wasn't really within my actual experience. It wasn't real. You know, it always felt distant. You know, but when I ran into like Von Freeman and Stitt and John Young and all these guys, it became real to me. It became. I realized that these were real people. They weren't just like mythological figures
Right.
or whatever. Because like, when you read these books like Bird Lives and all these
Yeah.
books, they made these guys sound like legends.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And
Mythological characters.
yeah.
Almost,
And so
yeah.
then when you met people, and then later on when I came to New York and I met, you know, Max Roach and Dizzy Gillespie and Roy Haynes and all these different people, you know, everything became real for me. You know, Thad Jones, you know.
Yeah.
Before that, it was like, you know, when it was just on records. And it wasn't a long period before I listened to the records and I went to the clubs because I was trying to learn how to play this music. And after a while, I figured, well, I'll just learn how they learned. You know, so I found out everything I could about how Charlie Parker and all these other people learned how to play. And then I just followed the same steps, minus what I considered the negative stuff, you know, drugs or
Right.
whatever, you know.
Right.
So I tried to follow the exact same steps. And one of the steps that I saw right away was that they went to a lot of sessions. You know, a lot of jam sessions, learned a lot of tunes by ear and all that. So that's when I started going out to try to find these sessions that were similar like to the ones that they went to. And that's when I ran into Vaughn and them. You know, so that was it was like a very short period between when I started listening to those records and when I started going to those clubs. I would say a matter of months. You know, started going to those clubs.
So that principle, I remember when we had the session here with the critics and the musicians, that you were saying that you actually, for living musicians, you do not, you pretty much don't listen to them on record.
No.
You want to hear them live. So is that where that started?
Yeah, it started there. And also a lot of cats would come through town. You know, I would see like Woody Shaw and Freddie Hubbard and Joe Henderson and all these cats because there was a club, something like the Vanguard called the Jazz Showcase. And all these guys would come through town and play at these clubs. And so we were down there like every week, you know, listening to these guys. And so, like I said, the music became real. To this day, I don't have a lot of Joe Henderson records because I heard him so much live.
Wow.
You know, I mean, whereas I know a lot of the younger guys, you know, they have a
They
stack
don't
full
have
of
a
records.
choice.
Yeah, well, exactly. They don't
Yeah.
have a choice, you know.
Right.
But I mean, I would be like, I mean, he would play like when I moved to New York at the Vanguard, I would be there like, you know, 4 nights out of the 5 or 6 nights, you know, I would be right there.
That's one of the things that Nicholas Payton talks about. I went to the Jazz Standard. It was Nicholas Payton, Christian
Well, he's
McBride.
old enough, so he would, you know.
Yeah,
he'd be
but
able
I
to-
mean, I'm talking about actually this dynamic of, and it was Mark Whitfield on guitar. We were in the back in the green room, and one of the things that Christian and Nicholas was talking about was the club. What's that club they used to have? The old cats used to go to and play.
Was it a piano bar or something like that, or Bradley's?
Bradley's.
Yeah.
Like that was like the spot.
Yeah, that was a hang. Yeah.
Right, and
in more ways than one.
right. So they were talking about that, but then Nicholas made this point, and I interviewed him here about 6 weeks ago, and he made the same point. He said, you know, when Clark Terry's playing in town, when some of these cats are playing in town, I don't understand how all these young musicians, these young trumpet players, are not there. Like you say, you'll be there 4 nights a week. You know what I mean? I find that here.
Because it's school. It's like school. Right. I mean, that was our school. You know, I didn't go to Berkeley or any of these kind of places like this, you know. And at the time that I came to New York, that's when a lot of people were starting to go to those schools. I mean, I would say like a lot of the guys, not everybody, but a lot of the guys 4 years younger than me, like 1960, there was just a slew of cats born in 1960. You know, I mean, a whole bunch of them. They're still on the scene.
Right.
And most of them were like going through these schools. Not everybody did. You know, I mean, cats like Graham and Graham Haynes and Lonnie Plexico. You know, they were still like pretty much picking up stuff like I was picking it up. You know, but there were a bunch of guys like Donald Harrison, Branford Marcellus, and all these
who went to
guys,
Berkeley.
Yeah, who were going to the schools. I mean, they didn't go long, some of them. You know, but they were going. They were coming through the schools. You know. And I always heard a difference in the sounds of the cats who went to the schools and the cats who didn't.
Interesting.
I always immediately heard a difference in that sound.
What do you? Can you describe what the difference is? What you think? You know, without casting aspersion, just as the descriptive thing.
It's just because I mean a lot of those guys they lost a little bit of that later, but it's just
more of a regimented, or they learn a particular method in the schools or something like that.
There's a sameness. You know, when you pick up something yourself. You make a lot of mistakes, you know, because it's trial and error, basically, is what it is. That's what Thad Jones used to describe it, be basically trial and error. I used to ask him how did he learn and how did Duke Ellington learn and all this kind of stuff, and he would say the same thing every time. He called everybody booger. And so he would say, trial and error, booger, trial and error. You know what I mean? And he said, that's it. You know, you know, I'm not going to use his exact words, but he said, you try, you mess up. You try again, you mess up. You know,
use the words.
But that's he said that's basically how they learn.
Okay.
You know, I mean, of course you pick up different things from different people here and there and stuff like that, but it was basically a try this. It work or it don't work, you know, try it again, refine it kind of thing, you know.
Right.
But there's nobody there telling you this scale works with this and this does this and this does this, you know. So there's a different process. If you see 4 or 5 guys go through that same process, there's going to be a sameness about their sound. You know, they're going to be playing some of the same lines. They're going to play them some of the same ways. You know, I mean, they're going to have some of the same ways of thinking. They're going to be talking about, you know, Lydian this, drop
Lydian
5,
chromatic,
this, you know,
right,
I mean,
right.
certain terminology
Right.
and everything. And certain guys, like, I'll just use Lonnie Plexico as an example, he didn't have that. You know, he just picked up the stuff on his own.
Right.
And so when 2 guys picked up the stuff on their own, they're going to have slightly different language. It's going to be slightly more personalized.
Right.
I mean, just naturally, not necessarily because they're trying to, but just because their process can't be the same.
Now,
you know.
Okay, you said that the Charlie Parker Omni book wasn't around. Now, when I started playing in the late 70s, it was around. Oliver Nelson's book of patterns was around. And a lot of cats learn those patterns.
Yeah.
Did you ever go through that?
No.
No. Okay.
I did a lot of transcribing.
Okay.
You know, and I tried to figure out, you know, how the movements, you know, I mean, just figured out what they, you know, what they were and everything. And I looked at the stuff very simply. I mean, it was just basically like scales, some basic triads, real simple. You know,
Okay.
I mean, when I ran into like cats who came out of school and they were talking about altered dominance and 2/5s and all this kind of stuff, I at first I didn't know what they were talking about.
Interesting.
You know,
Interesting.
and then when they would play it, I was like, oh, okay, that's just what I call, you know, going to sea or something like that. You're calling it 2/5, but it's the same sound, you know, and everything. Now it may sound like it's just different nomenclature and everything, but after it all adds up, you see it just adds up to like a different approach. Because even to this day, I have a different approach than a lot of those guys who came through school and stuff like that. So sometimes when I teach, people have to, you know, adjust to my lingo and everything just because I'm calling things, looking at things a little differently.
Okay.
You know?
All right.
But for me, it's just that I tried to follow as much as I could the guys who created this music. That's really all it was. It's not mysterious,
right.
You know. It's like they created the music. The schools didn't. So it was a simple choice to me. I was like, you know, I'm gonna follow the cats who created it. I'm gonna follow some cats who kind of couldn't get it and then start teaching.
Well, it's like
it's
like athletes. It's like going to a school and learning the rudiments from a coach, as opposed to imitating Dr. J and Bird and Jordan.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you're going through this apprenticeship process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 14 to 18. You could say that you were apprentice. You really were the beginning level.
Mm-hmm.
Then in college, you're in the woodshed. You're learning tunes. You're going to jam session. You're recording. You're transcribing. That's your journeyman period.
Right. And being able to watch the musicians play was a big part of it. Watching them, how they breathed, how they held the horn. You know, different kind of fingerings they were using. You know, that was a.
You mean like alternate fingerings?
Yeah, you miss that with records. You know, I mean, you see a lot of stuff. You know, you can check out a lot of things and say, oh, that's how he's doing that. You know, I mean, you can check out a lot of things by seeing somebody do it. You know, rather than there was a whole lot of stuff I picked up. I remember when I got to New York, I would be showing cats stuff, even guys who were just 4 years younger than me. And they would say, man, how did you pick that up? I was like, from watching the cats. You know, I mean, you know, because a lot of these guys, they come from cities where there were not a lot of older cats. You know. I mean, and they went straight from like their city, wherever they're from, to like Boston, you know, to go to school or whatever, you know.
Right.
So there were not a lot of these older cats that they could catch. When I say older cats, I mean these guys who were really, really self-taught. I don't mean just older guys who were from schools and stuff like that.
Right.
But guys who, you know, were self-taught. And I was most interested in the cats from Charlie Parker's era because there weren't that many of them around. You know, and I was really interested in anybody born like around 1920, 1922, 1925. You know, I was really interested in those guys. That's why I wanted to join the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra when I first got here.
Okay, so tell us about that.
Because of Thad, you know.
Okay,
Thad,
what year was that?
That was, well, it's a long story.
All right.
I first saw the orchestra when I was in college. They came through the town, Bloomington, Illinois, where I was. And I was pitiful then, so I really wasn't ready to. I couldn't even talk to the cats because I had no idea what they were doing. The next time I saw them was at the Jazz Showcase in Chicago, you know, and so that was in 1977, a year before I moved to New York, and so I decided that I was going to be bold and go up to Thad and, you know, just be bold, you know, because I mean I heard that's what cats do, you know,
Right.
and I was a shy guy. I wasn't really bold, you know, so I went up to him and said. You know, because at that time, there was like no security around cats, something like that. Cat went to the bar, get a drink, you could walk right up to him, you know. Right. And so I was like, Mr. Jones, you know, my name is Steve Coleman. I play alto saxophone, and I'm going to be in your band. You know, that was the boldest I could get.
That's bold. That's bold.
And so he started laughing. He had this deep laugh. You know, him and Elvin had this, you know, this kind of, you know. And so he's like, oh. He said, oh, you are a young man. He said, okay, can you play lead? You know, and right away my courage started going away. You know, it's like as soon as he fixed the stare on me, you know, I was like the Fred Flintstone thing. I was starting to shrink. You know, and so I had sat in with Pepper Adams maybe 3 weeks before that. He had came through with a small group, and I sat in with him, and I thought that would impress him. You know, and I was like, you know, I was already stammering and everything. I was like, well, you know, I sat in with Pepper Adams about 3 weeks ago. He said, I didn't ask you that. He said, I asked you, could you play lead? And I got smaller. You know, it's like, you know. And I don't even remember what I was so nervous at that point. I was like, oh, college, you know.
Right.
And so he's like, oh, okay, we got a rehearsal this Wednesday. Bring your horn down. We're going to see what you can do. I was like, oh, shit.
Oh, well, What did he say? What did he called your bluff?
I was like, Wednesday? That's like 2 days. Man, I was like out of it. I was pitiful, you know, and I was sweating bullets, and I was like, Wednesday? I didn't expect him to, you know, give me a
Take
year.
you up
year
on, right,
you
right.
know? You know. And so I took a friend of mine who was even worse than me down, you know. I was like, maybe this guy give me some cover, you know. And so we came down, and we said that he ignored us for a while. He just was rehearsing the band in the middle of the day in the club, you know. But he knew we was there, you know. And so he said, okay, we got these two youngins, these two boogers. We're going to bring them up, see what they can do. And he put me on lead and put the other guy on second. Man, that was the most nervous I'd ever been. The only time I was more nervous was that when I first met Miles Davis, but that's another story.
Okay.
But I was so nervous that there was this whole band of like professionals, you know, like, you know, New York cats, and this was big to us in Chicago.
Yeah.
And here I was on lead alto. I'm supposed to be like lead, you know. And I was like, oh man, I know I'm just gonna like butcher this, you know. And he had all this handwritten music, looked like Beethoven, stuff was scribbled, you know. and I was only used to reading printed charts. I had never seen anything written by hand.
Oh,
you know? I was like, I can read pretty good, but I was so nervous. You know?
Right.
And so I can't even remember the audition. It was like a blur, you know. And so I played, and you know, and he was like, all right, that wasn't bad, you know, that wasn't too bad. He said, but you know, we play the Vanguard every Monday night. He said, what you gonna do, commute? He's like, you know, it's like, you know, like 800 miles or whatever, you know. And I was like, man, give me a year, you know. I was like, I got some work to do. I was like, give me a year, I'll be in New York. He was like, whatever, you know, because I guess he had heard that before, you know. But I knew what I had to do because I saw the level difference, you know. They were like, I saw just the level of professionalism. See, up until that time, I had been concentrating purely on improvisation.
Okay.
I could read good, you know, from playing in big bands and stuff like that. But my focus was on how to improvise. And these guys were professional in so many other ways, you know. I mean, just the consistency, you know,
the blend, dynamics.
There was so many different things. It was just everything was like started on a high level, and I realized that even if I could solo better than some of the cats, I wasn't on that level consistently, and I had to get together some basic stuff, you know.
Okay.
And so that's what I worked on in that year. I mean, I practiced, you know, like crazy and everything, and I moved to New York. You know, I had like an alarm clock. You know, I moved to New York, and I would go down to the Vanguard, and the girl on the door liked me. She used to let me in, you know. And I would just go by that pillar in the Vanguard and just stare at Thad like every Monday, you know. And he would ignore me, you know. After about the third Monday, he was like, Booger, I'm tired of you just staring at me, you know, like this. He's like, why don't you just bring your horn down next week, you know? And so I brought my horn down. I just vibed him, you know.
Right. You didn't say nothing.
No. I mean, I couldn't. There was nothing to say. You know?
Right.
And so eventually, you know, I got in the band. It took a while, but eventually I worked my way in the band and everything, and we went on.
Now, how about learning certain tunes and stuff to prepare, like records? And did you do that specifically for them?
I played in every big band and went to every jam session and did every gig that I could possibly do.
Okay.
I mean, I was just hanging out like all the time in between. Even after I got to New York, I was still doing that, you know, because as you run into more and more professionals, you were running the cats, and they would tell you little things here and there. You need to get this together. You need to get that together. The thing that I didn't have together when I joined this band was the doubles, because in my chair, you had to play saxophone, alto saxophone, soprano saxophone, clarinet, and flute. Right. Now, clarinet and flute was like, especially flute, that was like way, you know. I was like, I had never touched a flute, you know. So, I mean, so these were things that he was like, that's the chair. That's what you got to play. You know what I mean? You know. And so you had to get that together and everything. But see, he told me later, he wanted me in the band. He was looking for like young black guys who can read, because this thing was like, there's not a whole lot of cats who can read nowadays, you know. Right. And he heard, all he was listening for was potential, how I could come along. He wasn't expecting me to be, you know, I mean, you know, totally ready at that time. He was just looking for potential. And I understand that, because when I look at cats today, I look for the same thing, you know. But at the time, I was thinking like you had to be totally ready, like totally, you know, at the top before they would pick you, and that wasn't really the case. You know, cats could kind of see you developing and everything, because like Coltrane wasn't totally ready when he joined Miles, you know, and Miles wasn't totally ready when he played with Charlie Parker, but Bird could hear the potential in Miles, you know. And so, and sometimes you're wrong, but normally you can hear, you know, where cats are coming from, you know. Right. So then from there, I played with that. I played with Sam Rivers' big band. I played with Slide Hampton, had a big band that I played in. You know, Paul.
Is that the big band? Because he had several.
It was Collective Black Artists, it was called, you know, and it was a big band that, like, he would have different guest people. He would be featuring different guests. So that's how I got to play with Mongo Santa Maria and Dizzy Gillespie and all these people, because they would come in as guests, you know, in front of the band, and then you would, you know, get to play with them or come up in pairs and things like that, you know. So I got to see a lot of great people just because, you know, of who they knew.
And what about Sam Rivers? Tell us a bit about the Sam Rivers.
That was a whole different scene. That was a whole different scene. I mean, because that was like all the, you know, the guys who played tunes called the Outcats. That's what they called them, you know. But the funny thing was Mel Lewis in the Thad Jones band, he called me the Outcat, you know, so,
right.
in the band, you know. But I mean, but these cats were really a lot further out than I was, you know.
Okay.
So Chico,
what'd you get from there?
I got a lot. I got a lot because I had never heard music like Sam's before. I had never seen anything like that, you know. I mean, and also the characters. I mean, each guy was different, you know. Whereas in the other scene, people were more the same, you know. In this scene, like Hamiet Blewett and Olu Dar and all these guys, you know, and you know, and Craig Harris and different. Everybody was like really different, had their own characteristic and everything, you know. And you know, and then they had a whole different way of playing, different kind of devices and everything. And so I got a lot out of it, you know. I mean, but especially from Sam, his writing influenced me a lot. Okay. You know, it's a big influence even on my music today. You know. And so I got a lot out of that, and I liked going back and forth between the different scenes. I mean, I like the different things that you got from the different scenes. Okay. So I dug it. And I played Cecil Taylor's big band. He had a big band for a second, you know, that I played in, and Paul Jeffries, who used to arrange for Thelonious Monk. He had all these original Monk compositions. He had an octet that like focused on monks. So I got to, you know, deal with a lot of that architecture, you know, in that band. And then there was all the jam sessions and sitting in with cats and all that, you know. And then later on after I went through that whole big band scene, I started getting small groups, you know. And the first really hip small group that I joined was this guy named Doug Hammond. He's not real well known, but he really turned me out in so many ways. I got a lot of rhythmic stuff from him, especially like rhythmic stuff, you know. He's a drummer. Who had played with Bingus, and he played with Sonny Rollins, you know, and he's not well known. He's living in Europe now. Okay. But he's 15 years older than me, so he just, you know, he was there in the 60s and all that, and he could just pass down all this information and tell me stories and everything. Plus, he had the boxes of music that he was a composer, you know. I mean, is a composer, so he had these boxes of music, and so I picked up a lot from him. He was like one of my earliest influences. So I would say, like, after some of the guys on record, Charlie Parker, Sonny Rollins, Train, all those. The same guys everybody else was influenced by. The people who I influenced by was Von Freeman at that period, Sam Rivers and Doug Hammond. They were like some of the biggest influences on me at that time, you know, in different ways.
Wasn't that cat named Bunky?
Yeah, Bunky Green. I missed him. That's right. Yeah, but that was in Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Bunky Green.
Because Bunky Green and Von Freeman, I considered the top two saxophone players in Chicago. Von was on tenor and Bunky was on alto, you know. And Bunky wasn't from Chicago. He's from Milwaukee. Okay. But he was living in Chicago at that time. And now he lives in Florida. Okay. You know, but he was a big influence on me too. You know, I mean, just because, I mean, he was like an alto player that I could look up to. Although it didn't matter to me, alto and tenor. Right. But still, that was like a direct connection, you know.
Why do you think you chose, I don't know if this is a weird question or not, say alto over tenor?
Just different people feel comfortable with different instruments. They feel like it's their voice, and I just felt like alto was my voice because I played tenor, I played baritone, I played all the saxophones. You know, baritone was just too damn heavy, you know. But it was between tenor and alto, and I went through a period where I played tenor for a while. You know, but I mean, I just alto just felt right. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't a whole lot of intellectual process, you know, and also Charlie Parker was really my man, you know. So I mean. Alto just stuck with me, but I knew that I wasn't going to imitate Charlie Parker for long. I mean, I knew it wasn't about imitation. I mean, because the reason why I liked each one of these people was because they were different.
And their individual voice and style.
Yeah, the reason why I liked Coltrane and Bird and even some of the older cats, Don Byas and people like that, because I went back, you know, Louis Armstrong and everybody, Lester Young, Joe Henderson, because they all sounded
Coleman
different.
Hawkins.
Yeah,
right.
It's because they all sounded different. And so I knew right away that's what attracted me to them, was the individuality. And then the old guys would tell you got to find your own voice, you got to tell your own story. You know, they would keep pushing that, you know, what's your story, what's your story? And so after a while, I started asking myself, what is my story? You know,
so when would you say that you came into your own in terms of your own voice?
Yeah, people ask me that a lot.
Story?
There's no, it wasn't a line. You know, it wasn't like I crossed the line and looked back and said, I got it, you know. I mean, in some ways, I'm still trying to figure out a lot of things.
Well, that's like Sonny Rollins in a sense.
You know.
That search, that constant search.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you realize that you've accomplished some things only because people tell you. You know, I mean, it's sort of like the people are like a mirror kind of thing. You know, they say, man, you know, like when I joined Thad Jones' band, there was a baritone saxophone player, Charles Davis, who was in the band.
Yeah.
You know, and he, you know, he was like, yeah, you playing that funny stuff. You know, you got your own. You know, I mean, you know, so he would say some stuff like that. You know, and after a while, you'd be like, what funny stuff? You know, I mean, you know, and the cats would be, you know, they tell you things, and after a while, you realize there's something maybe a little bit different, and everything. But it was, to me, it was like that. It was tiny, you know.
But they could hear it and they reflect. It's so interesting, Mr. Charles Davis, because when I got out of college in '85, I studied for a summer at Jazzmobile.
Oh, okay.
And Charles Davis was one of the instructors.
Yeah, he's a funny cat, man.
Yeah.
He really, you know, when I got in the band, him and this older brother named Irvin Stokes, they were like, you know, we gonna, you know, Junior, you're green under the ears. We're gonna take you, you know, I mean, you know, it's like, we're gonna take you and we're gonna indoctrinate you, you know, it's like and everything. And so they it was funny, man. They would take me to strip joints, all kind of stuff, you know, just to try to loosen me up. You know,
Right,
I was like just, you know, into the music like this, and they was like, it's more to it than the music. You got to, you know, learn about some other stuff too, you know. So,
Right.
So they were, you know, they called themselves like, you know, introducing me to the, you know, I mean, you know, the gauntlet, you know.
Right. Right.
So it was interesting, but I mean, but they also, you know, gave me a lot of information, told me a lot of stories and all that kind of stuff. So it was good knowing cats like that. Not everybody, you know, has to be like big name or whatever. You know, there's a whole lot of cats. Another cat I used to hang out a lot with when I first got here, I used to live up in Harlem, was Tommy Turrentine. You know, I used to follow him around a lot because this cat had, to me, a great feel. I mean, his feel was, in my opinion, it was killer. You know, just the way he swung and everything, you know. And so I would like playing with him, just even playing the heads and melodies with him and everything, just to try to, you know, get the feel that he was getting and everything, you know. And I even told him, I was like, man, you know, your feel is killing, you know. He was like, oh man, I ain't playing nothing. I was like, you know, yeah. It's like, you know. And so I would follow him around just for that. And he didn't have a big name. His brother Stanley, had a bigger name, you know. But so there was a lot of guys like that, even in Chicago, that there were certain things that they can do, and they could do them really well. And then you would follow those guys for that. You know, there was a cat named Guido Sinclair that, like, he kept his fingers real close to the keys, and he had, like, really good hand position. I mean, you know, different cats had different things. And you would try to cop from all these guys, you know, and just get what you can. So there's so many cats. I'm naming the guys that you would know.
Right.
But
there are other cats, too.
Oh, man,
well, let me ask you something. Did you hear about this cat, Sigurd Rascher?
Oh, yeah, the high notes.
The altissimo range and stuff.
Yeah, I had his book. I still have it.
Okay.
Yeah, top toes for saxophone.
Yeah,
like
right. I had that.
And ridiculous stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, man, because I mean, I think Brecker studied with him. I think Phil Wood studied with him.
But I'm gonna tell you the cat though. There was a cat named, oh man, what's his name? All these cats, the same cat studied with him too. And I did go see him one time. What's his name? I can't think of his name.
Sure, it probably come to you when we get to something else.
But Eric Dolphy studied with him.
Really?
And a friend of mine named Charles Thompson was studying with him at the time. And he used to tell me about the guy, and he was Joe Allard.
Yes.
Yeah, Joe Allard.
He's definitely legendary.
So he used to tell me about this cat. He said, man, you got to come. He kept telling me over and over. He said, man, you got to come and check out this cat, Joe Allard. I was like, why? You know, he's just a saxophone teacher. He's like, oh, man, this guy can do some incredible stuff. And so he would describe some of the stuff that he could do. He said the guy could play one scale, fingering the scale going up, but what you would hear is the scale going down. You know, I would be like, get out of here. You know, and so he said, and then he would hold one fingering and play a whole scale up and down. I was like, get the, you know, I didn't believe none of it, right? He's like, come on down.
The skeptical thing, right?
And exactly, you know. And he said Dolphy studied with the cat, and Train used to go along with Dolphy to the lesson, so that got me interested. Right. You know, I was like, oh, Coltrane, okay. You know, so I went and checked the cat out, and I'm telling you, the cat could do everything that this guy said, and he could do it on your horn. With your mouthpiece.
Which really proved it to you.
I was like, you know. And so I used to talk about like Dave Liebman and all these cats studied with him. And I was like, man, that cat Joe Allard, and Liebman would go, whole. I mean, and so all those guys studied with him. But I mean, he was really old at that time. I never got a chance. You know, I didn't have any money anyway. I was playing on the street for a living. Right. I didn't have no. I don't know how Charles was studying with the cat because he had less money than I did.
Well, tell us about that. Now you were playing when you talking about in New York.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. How long you playing on the street? and then tell us where you live, because you mentioned Harlem, and definitely we're in the National Jazz Museum of Harlem. Tell us about Harlem.
Well, I lived in different spots.
Yeah.
Not all of them legal. You know, sometimes we'd be squatting.
Yeah.
You know, like on 100. Did I see Graham? Graham, you in here? Yep. Yeah, you remember that, right? Yeah, yeah. We squatted on this place on 125th, close to Broadway. You know, I'll never will forget this, man. One day I was walking down 125th Street, and Graham came down the street and said, "Steve, all your shit's out the street. The marshals came in, they boarded up the building."
Oh, no.
I was like, "Man, where's my horns?" He's like, "They're on the street."
Whoa.
I was like, "Oh, man." You know,
did you grab his horn, Graham?
No, I was there watching the stuff.
All right. Okay. I hear you. All right, okay.
It was deep, man.
And then I called a friend who had a van, and we moved the stuff. I was living in Queens, and we moved all this stuff from my place.
Well, I was a blessing that he was there.
Oh, yeah.
Whoa.
Because, I mean, I couldn't imagine moving in on the subway.
Okay.
But you know, so we had, you know, I lived in different places in Harlem. You know, I lived over on Convent. I lived up on me and this cat John Paul Borelli. We lived,
Guitars, yeah.
Yeah, we lived up in Tony Williams' house, which is like on what was that, 142nd or something like this. You know, between right around City College, a little bit above that. You know, Tony Williams had an old girlfriend that lived up there, and she had his house, and we lived.
You mean drummer Tony Williams?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Tony Williams. Yeah.
Okay.
He kicked us out.
Okay.
My claim to fame was getting kicked out by famous drummers. It's like
Hey.
Tony Williams kicked me out. I won't go no further into that.
All right. Okay. I hear you.
But you know,
So you live in various spots.
yeah.
And you played up here, you jammed up here?
Oh yeah. We were all up and down the street, all up and down everywhere around, because they had a lot of after-hour spots.
Okay.
Then, you know, places that wouldn't start till like 3. You know, and so we would go to the
Name some of those spots.
well, they didn't, some of them didn't have no names.
Oh,
it was
really?
like a thing where a cat would, you know, a door would, you know, like
Are
drug-
you cool?
No, they were like drug places and
Right.
stuff like that, but there would be music happening, you know, but the cats
okay.
would open the door, you know, look at you and then let you in.
Would you like show your horn that, you know?
Well, they kind of know you after
Okay.
a while, and plus they knew it was music going on
Right.
and everything, you know.
Okay.
But I mean, but the regular places were like Smalls and Lickety Split and what was the name of that place? The Grand, something Grand, Baby Grand or something.
Baby
like this?
Grand, yeah.
You know, and you know,
St. Nick's Pub, right?
yeah, and huh? Diggs Den was right. That was on 145th, right? Yeah, there was so many places. There was a lot of places, and there was a big difference between the places up here and downtown, because some of those places downtown they wanted you to pay to come in to play, you know, and everything. And I was like, I ain't, you know, I was used to Chicago thing. I'm like, I'm not paying, you know, and then playing.
Yeah,
you know,
right,
it's like you know,
right.
that's out of the question, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, like I said, at this time there was a lot of cats coming from school and everything, and
Right.
they were just anxious to play and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Plus the cats, you know, I felt like all the guys who could play and who had like personality, like I said, Tommy Turntine, Bucky Thorpe, all these guys, they were all uptown, you know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I wanted to play with those cats. Then there was a few places in Brooklyn, you know, there was just different places that we could play at in Brooklyn. Like one time I even had a gig at the Blue Cornet, I think it was called, over, you know, and on what was that, on Fulton, I think it was, you know.
Okay.
And then there were places out there where Graham, you know, a couple of places out there where Graham lived in Hollis, you know. And so we would just go around. And then there was also a place in the Bronx, Salt and Pepper or Pepper and Salt? Yeah, Pepper and Salt, yeah.
Okay.
And man, I used to live in that place. You know, we used to go there all the time.
Right.
They had a lot of sessions, and Lou Donaldson would be up there a lot.
Ooh.
And also my man with the turban, Lonnie Smith.
Like, listen, Smith?
Yeah, and you know, just it was so many cats. You know, I mean, and these guys were like, you know, killer.
Right.
I mean, Lou was like, you know, playing, you know. So,
Oh, yeah.
And they knew all these tunes and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
So you had to like be on your thing, because they would always play some stuff you didn't know.
Right.
They wouldn't ask you if you knew it. They just, you know.
Volunteered to it.
That was their way of weeding.
By
cats.
the way, Lou Donaldson will be our next Harlem Speaks interviewee on September 16th. So make sure to be here for that.
Yeah, Lou's walking history.
Sweet Lou. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, did you play with him?
Oh yeah, a lot. A
Now,
lot.
do us a favor. I mean, you play with all these cats. The jam session, the cutting contest is a part of the tradition. Can you? I
They
mean,
didn't call them cutting contests, but that's what they came out to be sometimes.
Okay.
You know?
Tell us about a cutting contest where, you know, either you cut somebody or you got cut.
I mean, you know, a lot of it's subjective, but I mean,
True.
you know, I mean, with the old cats, there wasn't even,
even a question of you.
No,
cutting in.
there was no question about who sounded better than who.
Right.
I mean, those cats, a lot of them, they knew more stuff than you forgot. I got blown off the stand.
Oh, they forgot more stuff than you knew.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, I got blown off the stand many a time. Just to tell you a story,
Sure.
I went and sat in with Freddie Hubbard at the Blue Note, and so Freddie's like one of these serious gladiator kind of cats.
Right.
I mean that was
Like
his
Roy
thing.
Eldridge
Yeah,
kind of
Sonny
thing.
Stitt was like that too.
Right.
Same kind of thing.
Yeah.
So and Freddie was cocky. So he's like, "What you want to play?" Like this attitude. And I was like, "It don't matter." He said, "Oh, it don't matter." He's like, he did. He said, just one of those things. I was like, yeah, I think and before I even finished talking, he counted it off like way upstairs. Like 1, 2, and I mean, and he's like water. I was like, this cat on trumpet? He's playing like a saxophone player, just like, and then he stopped and just looked at me, Man, that was a serious lesson.
Okay.
I mean, I tried to play it everything,
Right.
but it was like struggles, McGuggles, it's like he wiped me out. He did the same thing to Winton too.
Right.
Because those kind of cats, man, they can reach back to some stuff that you haven't even gotten to.
Right.
And
then they played. I mean, Freddie Hubbard, he played with Sonny. He played with Train.
And this happened to him when he, in the late 50s. He went through that.
Right.
So it's like a rite of passage.
Right.
So he was like anything, huh? It's like, and that's how they were. And Stitt was like that too. You would call a tune and then he would like immediately call it in a weird key or something like that.
Right.
Like doing stuff like that. I saw him do that to this cat Guido Sinclair, that I told you like fly all around the horn. But the thing is that Guido was limited in certain ways.
Right.
So he could play in certain easy keys. And so he was playing and stuff and whipping around the horn and everything. So Stitt was like, okay, and so he called off something, but like in a really strange key. And Guido just came to a halt. I mean, it was like a car just screeching to, and Stitt could still play all this stuff.
Right.
And
Whatever the key was.
And he was like, he was like,
Right.
and that's how they were, man. And you just I was in the audience then. I was just taking notes. I was like, okay, you got to have your keys together because the cat embarrass you.
Right.
And plus singers, playing with singers, they might call tunes off in anything, and you have to, That's another thing. And I played with a lot of singers. I was always into singers.
Well, we're gonna take a little break.
Okay.
We're gonna talk about your experience with singers. We got to deal with M-Bass.
Okay.
We got to definitely deal with M-Bass. Want to talk about your, 30-something page piece on Charlie Parker that blown away, Jazz World on jazz.com, and talk about your philosophy about music and life.
Well, I'm long-winded, so you gotta cut me off.
I'll definitely guide you. So let's give Steve Coleman a hand.
I played with a lot of singers in Chicago, and I've always had singers in my group. I had a group before I left Chicago for New York. I had a group that was playing. We had a gig. We had one of the best gigs in Chicago. It was 5 nights a week at this place, And I was just living with my mother, so the money really didn't matter, But we would 5 nights a week was like killing. Ron Freeman used to say, "Man, you got the best gig in Chicago," And
What were you playing?
I had a group. It was like an organ, drums, saxophone, trumpet, and there was a singer. We had a singer that come on. At that time in Chicago, you always had a singer for like relief and everything,
Right.
But nobody wanted to just hear horn players play all day.
Mm-hmm.
But I like singing, I always liked singing. So when I got to New York, well, at first, like I said, I was playing on street, doing a lot of street playing,
Where?
I mean, at first I was just playing at 50th and Broadway by myself, But after a while, I met different guys. I met the Johnson brothers, Mark Johnson and Billy Johnson. I met them. You just meet people here. They were from Milwaukee, I think, And I met Graham. I don't know where we met Graham, but I remember it being Washington Square Park, but it might have been somewhere else. Yeah. And again, we were playing in the park and stuff like that, So we the four of us, we formed this kind of band that, it was like kind of informal, but we just call each other up. If it wasn't raining, we go out and play, And there were a bunch of other cats playing on the street. George Braith was out there a lot, playing that double horn that he plays, Braithophone, And he was killing, man. I like this playing a lot,
Okay.
And I like the space he used and everything, And so, and of course, he reminded me of Rassan,
Right.
So
Roller curve,
yeah. And so, we played on the street a lot. You know, it was a way of, playing and also of making a little bread and all
And
that kind of stuff.
practicing,
Yeah.
Shit.
And you had to, that's when I started to develop my sound, just playing over the streetcars and people hollering and stuff. That's one thing. Plus, when you play outside, you always sound real small, so you tend to want to, fill up the space more. You know. And so we did a lot of that, and then after a while, we would take that same band and try to do gigs and do different gigs around and everything. And then people would move to town, and you would hook up with different people. Mm-hmm. And so I met Cassandra Wilson.
Speaking of singers.
Yeah. I did a tribute to Charlie Parker at a place called Green Street that was down in, I guess they call it Soho now. But
What, Green Street Cafe?
yeah, you remember where it was on Green Street, right?
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah. And so we played there, and it was me and, man, I'm trying to think of Gerald Hayes and Frank Strozier, I think.
Frank Strozier.
Like
That's
three.
a cat. That's
Memphis cat.
Man.
Those Memphis cats were bad. Harold Mayburn and George Coleman and Booker had he lived, and so they had a whole school of cats, and they were all coming out under the virtuoso piano player Phineas Newborn Jr.
Yes.
And so my father had records of Phineas, and then he played the sweet bass. I used to go see him play too. Phineas,
Okay.
He's kind of crazy, but he was a bad cat on piano. And so anyway, I'm going off
That's
again.
all right. That's all right.
But
You mentioned Cassandra.
Yeah. So Cassandra was well, a little history before this.
Sure.
It involves Graham again. Me and Graham had hitchhiked through the South. I don't know what year that was, Graham, but it was probably like 81, 82, something like this. It could have been. Yeah. So
81.
we went to Chicago, and then a friend of mine dropped us off at the southern end of Chicago, and then we just hitchhiked, because we wanted to see the South, and we wanted to see the music that was happening and everything. And my father was like, y'all crazy. It's like, and I don't know. It took us a while. It took us about a month or whatever it was. It took us a good while. But we went down from Chicago, and we went down through Illinois. Then we went through Tennessee. Huh. Then we went through where would we go? We the first.
Tennessee, Mississippi.
Right, New Orleans. We ended up in New Orleans.
Mississippi to New Orleans.
But we hit all the big cities. We hit Memphis, and then we would. It was rough getting a ride because two young black guys getting picked. That's like we were at the bottom of the list in terms of who to pick up. And then we made eventually we made it to from Memphis we made it to Jackson, Mississippi.
Okay.
And that's when I first heard about Cassandra. Because I would talk to some people and they say, well, our homegirl just moved to New York, blah 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 blah. You got to look her up when you get there, and this and that. So we heard her name a lot, And then we went through New Orleans, and I heard people talking about her there too. And that's the first time I met Wynton's father. Ellis, yeah, and the clarinet player Baptiste, and also the Jordans, Kent Jordan and Kid Jordan, and all those guys. That's when I first met some of those people, and then we swung back up and went through Birmingham, I think it was, and we went through Atlanta, and that's where I first met the Harper brothers.
Winard,
and
Phil.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then eventually we made our way back up to New York, and so. So all that happened, so I knew Cassandra's name. That's all I'm saying. So when we played this gig, she was sitting in the audience. And so she asked me, she said, I don't know why she asked me because I was like the youngest cat in the band. She's like, can I sit in? And I was like, can you? I mean, it's like I was like, well, what do you do? She's like, I'm a singer.
This is before she said her name?
Yeah. I said, what's your name? She said, Cassandra Wilson. I said, I think I heard about you when, I went through the South and some people told me about you, And so she's like, yeah, I'd like to sing. And so I was like, cool, I asked everybody, it was like, cool, it was no problem. And so I think Bob Cunningham was on bass, and who was on piano? Bross Townsend? Yeah, it's going back for me, this gig. And so, because this is just a one-off gig. It wasn't like something we did all the time. It was just a tribute to Charlie, on Charlie Parker's birthday. It's like the
29th?
Yeah,
August?
29th of August,
Right.
yeah. And so she came up and I said, what do you want to sing? She said, I want to sing Opera Vive. I remember this like yesterday, the music part of it.
Bibbidi-boo,
Yeah.
bibbidi-boo. Mm-hmm.
And so, wrong key, but that's right.
What you got? I was gonna say, what do you got? A perfect fit?
No, I don't. But
but
was that far off?
All right.
No,
that's part of the initiation.
And so she came up and sang it, and she sang the head, and then she started improvising. And we were like, oh, you know, I mean, you know, she, you know, start soloing and stuff like that. You know, we expected to sing that.
To scat?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But still, she scattered in a way that it sounded like she knew what she was doing. Some people just do a kind of Scooby-Doo thing.
Yeah.
And you could tell that it's not, you all know what I'm talking about, you know, it's not, for a horn player, it's not really in there, you know, I mean, but she had been listening to the horn players, we could tell, you know, because she knew her way around the changes and stuff like that.
All right.
And so after she got through, I was like, yeah, you sound good. She said, can I sing another one? I was like, yeah, what do you want to sing? She said, Cherokee. I was like, whoa. I was like, you gonna solo on that too? She's like, yeah. I was like, oh, bold, huh, you know. And so she sang Cherokee. And she sang it and, you know, made all the changes in the bridge and everything. And so, you know, I was impressed, you know. I was like, man, you bad, you know, and everything. So we get out in the car and we sat down after the gig and she was just talking like, bird's the word and blah, 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 blah. I was like, I know all that. Yeah, Charlie Parker, we all know that. I was like, but what you going to do yourself? You know, I was like, Charlie Parker is cool, but, you know, that was like 1945, 1950, you know. We like 1982 or whatever it is. I was like, what you going to do now? And she was like, well, that's the music. That's the music. I was like, well, you know, we rehearsing. At that time, we were rehearsing up at, there was a drummer we'd already started Five Elements. There was this drummer named Larry Banks that was in the band, and his father had a brownstone up in Harlem, and we used to rehearse at his house. One of the main reasons he might have been in the band was because he had a brownstone. It's like, but that's kind of cool. But anyway.
But true.
But he had the space to rehearse, you know. I mean, and there wasn't no paying for rehearsals back then. That was out of the question.
Right.
You know? And so we used to rehearse at this place, you know. And so I told Cassandra to come up and, you know, and just, you know, start, you know, doing some stuff with us and everything. And she kind of freaked out in the beginning because I remember exact words. I gave her a tune of mine and she's like, this ain't singable, you know. And I was like, it will be if you sang it. It's like, you know. And she was like, no, this is not singable, you know, blah, 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 you know. And so I remember there's one thing I had called Squeeze My Brain. It was a crazy song that I used to sing just to show her that it could be sung, you know. But, I mean, it was, you know, my voice wasn't happening at all.
Okay.
You know. But I gave her this tune called No Good Time Fairies, and that's the one she told me wasn't singable. You know, she said, that's not singable. She ended up recording it with me, but that was the one that she told me wasn't singable and everything. So she started, you know, just coming, kept coming and everything. And we would still do regular tunes and stuff like that, but we'd also do our little own mix where we were just experimenting and everything. You know, we didn't have a name for it. We were just experimenting, doing different things. Because me and Graham had got together, and we would just talk about music, and we had a lot of interests that were outside of just, you know, just the straight-ahead tunes that everybody was playing, you know. Right. I mean, you know, Graham used to talk about Hendrix all the time, and we talk about, like, about different things, and we wanted to, like, just incorporate some of these other ideas into the music. We weren't purists, you know, I mean, per se, you know, even though, I mean, his father was Roy Haynes, so, I mean, he had all this history, you know, I mean, you know, right there. Right. I remember when I first met him, he said, you know, my father's Roy Haynes. I can play with him anytime I want, you know. I was like, well, I can't beat that. I can't touch that, you know. I can't say, my father's Coltrane, you know, I couldn't say that, you know. So, you know, so a lot of cats I met, you know, they came from these musical families and they had all this history and stuff like that, which was great, you know. I mean, I didn't have that myself. But Cassandra was, you know, she was just trying to do it on her own too, you know, just trying to figure stuff out and everything. So we just hooked up and, you know, other people would come in, Jerry Allen, different people, and we would just get together and play and all that.
Greg Osby too?
Yeah, he came along a little later, but Greg Osby too, you know, a little later. I still remember when he first called me up, you know. But that was after I played with this other singer because he heard me on a record with Abbey Lincoln. You know. And
the late, great now, Abbey Lincoln. Mm-hmm.
And so I always dug Abbey Lincoln. So I heard she was playing at the Vanguard. And so I went down to see her, you know. And again, I was hung out and everything. And I didn't say anything to her. I just listened, you know. And then she played again at what was called Sweet Basil's. You know, she played again at Sweet Basil's. And I made up my mind I was going to say something to her, you know. And so I went up to her. And I said, and I knew her whole history with Max Roach and all that, you know. And I said, Miss Lincoln, you're one of my favorite singers, you know, I mean, all time, you know. And she's like, oh, that's nice, young man. She's like, and I didn't have my horn. She said, you must be a musician. And I was like, yeah, I play saxophone. She's like, well, why don't you just bring down your horn tomorrow and play? Just like that, you know. And I'm just intuition, you know.
Right.
I mean, and I was like, she said, I got a feeling about you. I was like, you don't have no idea what I can play or not. I could be who done it and why, you know. and so, but you know, I wasn't gonna pass that up. So I came down and played and everything. You know, the audience got a good response, and I fit in with what she was doing. I just had to listen because she was doing a lot of originals and stuff like that. You know. And because it wasn't like she asked you what you wanted to play. It was her gig, and,
Right.
you had to play what she, So, I mean, either you could play it or you couldn't, And so she really dug it. And so she's like, I'm looking for a band. Can you help me find a band? She had the Southern accent, Like, can you help me find a band? I'm looking for a band, And I was like, yeah, I know some cats, And I've been playing a lot with this cat, James Wideman, who was like really good with, really tasteful cat with singers
Piano.
and everything. And he knew a lot of tunes. That was the thing.
Yeah.
He knew
Piano, right?
Yeah, right.
He's playing
right.
with LaVano now,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. He played with a lot of people,
Okay.
And he was in my band too.
Okay.
And so I introduced her to James, and then she got Mark Johnson and Billy Johnson, the same cats we were playing on the street with, And so that was, she really didn't need a horn player, but every once in a while I would appear with her, and then, when she did a record, she would want me to get together some people like background singers and all this kind of stuff and everything. So I introduced Cassandra to her too, and I was like, Cassandra, you got to meet Abby, because I mean that stuff that she's doing, she's like, it's like personal storytelling every time. I mean, all her stuff is coming right out of her life. It's not just, she's singing songs, whatever. I said, she has these originals that come right out of her life, And so I think there's something on the web now where Cassandra just wrote something about her where she was saying the same thing after she passed, And so, she was just, her timing, her phrasing was just killing. It's the same thing that comes from Louis through Billy through her. I mean, that same kind of phrasing, I mean, and Louis had it on the trumpet, and he had it as a singer.
Yes.
And Billy got that from him.
Right.
I mean, and Abby got that from them too. She always talked about Louis Armstrong. She always talked about Billie Holiday. And they just had that. I don't even know what to call it, man. But it's just like it's like a killing timing.
Let me just tell you this one quick anecdote. At Riverside Church, Betty Carter's memorial, Abby sang "Midnight Sun." Killed it, man.
Yeah.
Just absolutely.
Yeah. Well, they were born. I think they were born either the same year or 1 year apart. They were like exact contemporaries, and both from Michigan, probably. Although Abby was born in Chicago, but she was raised in Michigan.
Okay.
And Anna Marie Wooldridge was her original name. Yeah, Abby Lincoln, and then she got the African name Aminata Moseka. After that,
Wow.
But yeah.
So what did Cassandra get together with Abby?
Yeah,
just come check her out?
They got together. I mean, and I introduced them and everything, and they talked and all that. Cassandra was like the young spring chicken on the thing, and Abby would share information with her and everything, and she had a lot of stories. She had a lot of she wasn't shy about telling you stuff that all the stuff that was happening, the good stuff and the bad stuff. She wasn't shy about it and everything. But also one of the first things that happened to me when I got to New York was that I went up to Max Roach when he played at the Vanguard. Same thing, Max, one of my favorite drummers of all, and he's still one of my favorites, And so Max said, "Oh man, you a musician?" I was like, "Yeah, man, I play saxophone." He said, "Why don't you come up to the house and have dinner with us sometime?" Now, he just said this to me out the clear blue, and I was like, I didn't understand it, man. I was like, Max Roach asking me,
Right?
Coming to have, I'm like Joe Nobody, Of course, I ain't gonna say no,
Right.
So I went up there, and his family was there and everything. I don't remember everything about who's there, but there was a woman there, some kids and everything. And I corresponded with somebody on Facebook recently who said I was that kid that was there. It was like a grown cat now,
wow.
And he was like, "Yeah, man, that must have been me." He said that, So anyway, and I went up there, and everybody went to bed, and then Max started telling me all these stories about the cats, and that's what I went for.
Right.
I mean, it's like he started telling me, like, I mean, he knew I was waiting to ask, but I didn't want to say nothing at the table while we were eating, But I was waiting to, like, what about Lester? What about Bird? What about, But I couldn't say nothing, and he knew I was just,
right,
like
chomping at the bit.
He could feel it, So he started opening up, man, with all these stories, stuff I hadn't read in no books or nothing, crazy stuff. I mean, but also some musical stuff,
Yeah.
And that was like, for me, that was like what I lived for, was like that connection, through those guys, So that was, you get a lot of information, that, not just by playing with cats, but from talking to them,
Right.
Because they tell you a lot of different stories. I mean, Abby would tell us about Duke Ellington and this and that, and they would tell you personal stories,
Right.
The stuff that happened behind the scene and everything, and really let you know how the people were. So that's what I got from Thad, from Max, from Abby, from all those people,
Right.
I mean, they would just, they were like real generous, and they knew you were trying to learn, so they would, they would always lay some stuff on you.
I got some of that from Grady Tate, man.
Yeah.
He got some great stories.
Yeah, and those people were great storytellers too.
Yes.
That's the other thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they would get up and act and everything. I mean, they
Right.
were like into it because they come from that era.
Right.
The storytelling thing was a big thing. So.
Okay, now, all right, you mentioned 5 elements. Tell us about that and how that became M-bass and what musically was happening and what, I don't know if I want to say ideologically, philosophically was happening, because there's a lot going on with that, man.
Well, my opinion about, I don't really think about names and stuff like that. You know, I mean, I get asked about M-bass a lot, of course, you know, but you know, I just think that's something that the critics latched on to. I think Peter Walters might have been like one of the first cats to write about it. Yeah, and he was writing for the Village Voice back then.
At the time, okay.
Yeah, and he wrote a story, and then another cat would pick up a story, another cat, then the Japanese got it, and they just ran with it. You know, he was writing cartoons and all kind of stuff. You know,
wow.
And so that thing spread like that. But I think we were more concentrated on just trying to develop some music.
Okay.
You know, and we weren't really thinking about like. At least I wasn't thinking about, like, I wasn't worried about, you know, the names and all that kind of stuff. That part of it was, you know, people use that to get work or whatever, you know.
Well, not only that, but I mean, but it was the way that it's come down through history now is that that was like a school.
Well, because what happens is that people always associate a sound with a period. You know, I mean, you know, it just goes together. Like, you know, we associate. Musicians, a lot of musicians are reluctant to name things,
right.
You know, or to use a lot of names and everything because it locks you into like a certain kind of box and everything, you know.
Right.
So among ourselves, like if I'm talking to Graham, I don't say, well, let's play some M-bass, you know. I mean, you know, that's not, you know, that's not what we do. We don't talk about that. We talk about the specifics of the music and what we like to do and everything, and we're not worried about what it's called and all that, you know. We might mention names. You know, we might say some Tony Williams stuff or some Elvin Jones stuff or some John Coltrane stuff or whatever, you know, because that's more specific to us, the names. If I say Cecil Taylor, you know, I have an idea what area you're talking about. If you say something like free jazz, that don't mean nothing to me, you know, or even jazz, that don't mean anything. You could be talking about Count Basie or Kenny G or anything, you know. And so that has no, for a musician, I mean, for me, I can't say, you know, some of these school cats, it might be a different thing, you know. But for me, that doesn't mean anything.
Okay.
You know, if you tell me Shadow Wilson, I have a good idea of what you're talking about.
Okay.
If you say, you know, well, some straight ahead or some bebop or some hard bop, you know, those words, that's some stuff you read in books, which doesn't, to me, it doesn't mean anything. That's just my point of view. You know, it means nothing. I don't talk to the musicians like that.
Right.
We talk about specific people because, for me, the music is just people. I don't see it as something different. It's something that comes from the people, you know. So, I mean, you have to mention whoever you're going to mention, Muhal Richard Abrams or Big Sid Catlett or George Lewis or, you know, Thad Jones or Charlie Parker or, you know, Denzel Best. I mean, whatever you're going to, you know, whoever you're going to mention, that narrows it down to like a certain personality. Okay. You know, because for me, the music is really these personalities all put together. You know, stuff like I could even see in interviews like where they would talk to Charlie Parker about bebop, and the cat would keep pushing this bebop name, bebop, and Bird was like, whatever you want to call it, man, it's just music. You know, I mean, he would just be trying to, you know, but the guy would just keep, you know, I mean, because they felt like that's what the readers needed. They needed that to hang on to and everything. But, you know, I don't think creative musicians really dwell, at least I know I don't dwell.
Well, I got to be honest, here at the National Jazz Museum in Harlem with Loren Schoenberg and Chris McBride being the executive and co-executive directors.
Well, okay.
That's not, you know, it's like whenever I've taught jazz education for the museum stuff, we don't focus on periods like that. I mean, these are like catchphrases that, you know, typify a time or a sound.
Cliff notes, you know.
Yeah. Cliff notes.
Yeah.
So, but okay, I hear you. Music. But still, what was happening at that point in your own words and terms?
Okay, we were trying to figure out our version of what had happened before, basically. I think that's what everybody was trying to figure out. You try to make a contribution. You know, in other words, you're trying to move the music forward because we see the music as something that should be moved forward, not something that should be sit still and sit in the museum
not
or whatever.
Stagnant,
you know?
Right.
Yeah. And so we're trying to figure out how can we do that today in our time? How can we make our contribution? It's not anything different than what the cats did in the past, except for we're different people living in a different time. You know, we come up in an age of the internet, and iPods or whatever, you know. So we live in a different time. We have different tools and things like that. But still, we take our clues from like what happened in the past. You build on the shoulders of, you know, the giants that came in the past. You know, that's the human progress, you know, basically, you know.
Progression.
Yeah. But so you learn, you respect the past, and I've gone all the way back to like the Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, or whatever. I've studied all the ancient music stuff that I could study. Going back to way before there's recordings and all that kind of stuff. But you still try to figure out how are we going to present this from our perspective. There's an interview what Charlie Parker did that I don't know if you heard it. Paul Desmond's part of it.
Oh, yes.
And so and one of
what Paul Desmond said, your technique.
Yeah. Well, he's doing this, Right. But I mean, there's one point where the cat, I don't know if it's that interview or another one that Bird did with the same radio station, but there's one point where the guy asked Bird, he said, well, why was there such this violent change? Why were you so against what happened before and blah blah blah. And Bird said, well, no, let me correct you. We weren't against anything. He's like, it's just that we thought it could go another way. We had another vision for how it could go, so we're just trying to do it our way. And really that's how I see it. You have a different idea about it, and that's what makes me and you different. To me, it would be really messed up if everybody was like me, or if everybody was like Winton, or if everybody was like, Joshua Redmond, whoever,
Right.
I mean, the beauty of it is that you have these different things. That's my point of view, But still, you have to be true to yourself. It doesn't make sense if you're not going to do what you really feel. If you're just going to do what somebody's saying you're supposed to do, to me, you're wasting your time. Because although I think most people do that, but I think the whole point is that you try to figure out how you're going to make your contribution. And to me, that doesn't need a name. I mean, it only usually gets a name in retrospect anyway. Right. But as you're doing it, nobody says, okay, we're in the Baroque period now, so we got to do this. Okay, now we're in the Romantic period, so we got to be romantic. I mean, nobody, nobody's,
right.
What's this period called right here? Like right where we are now. You don't have a name for it.
Right.
They're gonna have a name for it 10, 20 years or whatever. We don't have no name for it. But you just do, you do the best you can, and you try to get out what's inside. And what you see in the universe and the world and everything, you trying to express that and tell your story. Really, it's that simple. I know it's not, that don't make good copy, but
it is what it is.
But that's what it is. You try to express yourself, tell your story, whatever that means for you,
right.
And I've traveled to Africa, to India, and Indonesia, all these places, trying to, looking at how different people told their story to try to get clues for how I could tell my story.
Right.
For example, I went to this village in Ghana, where this guy, I heard about this, I read about this, but I want to see it. This cat gets up every morning, and he, on the drums, without singing anything, he beats out the story of the tribe. The whole lineage. He talks about the different kings. They call them Yanas. This is the Dagomba people. Dagbani, I think is the language called. But I mean, he beats out the lineage of the tribe and tells the exploits of the kings and different things, and he moves on and stuff like this. And he does all this just on the drums without singing anything. I had to see this. Of course I'd heard about talking drums, but this was like literally talking. I mean, telling a story. And I wanted to go there. I wanted to ask the elders as much as I could, how is this possible? What's the mechanism by which you do it? How does it work and everything? I mean, I was really interested in that because it related to what I was trying to do. I've been hearing all my life people talk about telling a story with music and everything. And here was somebody literally telling a story, and I wanted to see what that was, And that's no different than like when Coltrane hooked up with Olatunji and asked him all those questions about, about the Yoruba language and the drum language and how it connected and everything. Same thing, we're all interested in how, finding out as much as you can about how to tell this story, how to use music to communicate. To me, that's ultimately what it's about, not any kind of styles or whatever. So I mean, like I said, I know that's not good for the press and everything.
But listen, I just I was blessed to interview Sonny Rollins yesterday.
That's the man.
And kind of basically the same thing. You're trying to communicate. You're trying to touch people, reach people. So
that's it. Otherwise, you can just stay home and just play in the closet. You ain't need to come out. It's like, because that's ultimately what it's about. There's this, we know it's vibration and all this kind of stuff,
right.
But you're trying to figure out how to use it and manipulate it in a way that you can, it's really symbolism. Is what it is. It's about you're using music. The music is the symbols. So it's like sonic symbols. I had album called The Sonic Language of Myth, and that's what I'm talking about, is using sound as these symbols and everything. But see, Coltrane and all those cats, they've been there before, so you can't really say what you're doing is new, because you're taking your clue from them. Now, the form of it may sound different, because we live in different times, we have different sensibilities, we have different tools and stuff like that, but it's basically the same thing. This has been happening for thousands of years. All that stuff about jazz and this and that, to me, that's like, that's just some current.
A lot of cats they say it's just music. Some want to put a ethnic or cultural thing, great black music.
Yeah,
what I mean?
Well, that's fine. If you can put whatever, you can call it boo boo. You can put whatever you want on it.
Right.
But in the end, it's people. If you take away all the people, you don't have any music. There's no elephants beating no bongos, or monkeys doing 2/5s, and nothing. You don't see major chords growing on trees. All these people who talk about how natural this is and everything. What they're really talking about is the human experience. Whether it's music or art or dance or whatever. And the great thing about humans is the ability to create and manipulate symbols. This is what makes us a little bit different than the other creatures on this planet that we know of. We have this ability to make a symbol and say this means this, and then we can make a symbol that means that symbol, and symbol, and so on and so on. Then you get language and everything else, and you get music. But what we're really doing is manipulating symbols. Like when somebody plays something and they say this is Obatala, this is the rhythm for Obatala and everything. That's making a symbolic connection, and of course, there's something about it in terms of the way we feel and everything, or the way a particular group of people might feel, that for them makes that symbol real, because this stuff is very real, right? Somebody walks up to you and say, "Motherfucker," you can actually get angry, and want to kill the person or something, based on that. If they call you a certain name and everything, now what really happened? It's just sound, but it means something to you, So it's the same thing. This is very powerful stuff. You can say something, somebody can shoot you.
That's right.
Just behind one word, something, and it's just a sound,
So, okay, now you've gone into an area that I wanted to go into, and you ventured there. So
mystical stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So,
yeah, you're getting deep.
Yeah.
You thinking it, and you're getting deep. I'm not even hearing you.
You can feel
your
it, right?
vibration is getting deep.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, because of our time constraints and because you touched on it, I'm going to leave it there. Oh, you wanted to get into it?
No. I mean,
no, but
they
see,
might be.
But the thing is, if they want to, I'm gonna let them, because really, I gotta be focused on time, and I gotta ask you about this Charlie Parker piece, man.
Oh, okay.
Got to, man.
Right.
But,
well, it's related anyway.
and we can do it. Yeah, The Dozens. Steve Coleman on Charlie Parker, edited by Ted Pankin. This was a piece that was published on Jazz.com about a year ago, and as quiet as it's kept, it's had a like an underground rumbling influence, because it's like he just laid down almost like a manifesto. Bam! Deal with this, and let me just read a little bit of it. Okay, I get a lot of what I call micro information from Parker. There is much in the way of technical things such as melodic movements and progressions, etc., but there are also the linguistic aspects of Parker's music and the emotional and spiritual content. In studying the history of how this music was developed, one can glean a great deal of insight about the natural world as well as human nature in general. This story has been told many times before. The clothes may be different, but it is the same story. In my opinion, by far the most dramatic feature of Bird's musical language is the rhythmic aspect, in particular his phrasing and timing. Not only his playing, but in combination with dynamic players such as Max Roach, Roy Haynes, Bud Powell, Fats Navarro, Dizzy Gillespie, and others. Although much more has been written about the harmonic aspects of Bird's musical language, most of this harmonic conception was already present in the music of pianists and saxophonists from the previous era, before Parker arrived on the scene. Among others, the music of pianist Duke Ellington and Art Tatum, as well as saxophonist Coleman Hawkins and Don Byas, demonstrated an already quite sophisticated grasp of harmony. And he goes into, this is like 30, you print this out, it's 30 pages. So check it out. Tell us where this came from, and what kind of statement were you trying to make about Bird in this piece?
Well, Ted approached me about doing this, and he said, it was a very simple thing. You pick 10 performances that you like, and you say why you like them. And he gave me I hadn't read any of this other stuff that other people gave, but he gave me the website, and he said, here's what everybody else, did, So I went on the website, and, a lot of guys were saying, I like this piece because it influenced me because, check out the way Ahmad is doing this and blah, 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 and this, And so I said right away, I was like, well, I really don't want to do anything like that. And so Ted's like, well, you can do what you want. I was like, well, what I want to do is, it would need to be a little bit more detailed than that. He's like, well, you can do what you want, And so I was like, really?
The wonder of the internet, where you just
yeah. And so I said, okay. I was like, but it probably won't be short, And he said, you can do what you want. He just kept saying that.
Right.
And so so I, after a little bit of negotiation and everything, it was, a little rough, but basically in the end, I just wrote this thing. I mean, I didn't just write it in one night like that.
Oh, no.
But,
no way.
But so, and I sent
How long did it take you?
It took a while. I mean, the thoughts were all in my head, but it's just that I'm not a writer, So I mean, it took a while to get it in like a coherent form where somebody else could read it and it makes sense, And so then when I put it out, and my wife Patty, she helped a lot because she read it like, this don't make no sense, So she helped me out a lot in terms of getting it in good form and everything because she's a poet, so she works with words and everything. Even though she's from Brazil, she still speaks English better than me.
All right.
So English has never been my best subject,
All
and so eventually I put it in, and Ted, just in terms of time, space constraints and all this kind of stuff, he organized the stuff, and everything, and like maybe you do this and maybe you do that, but he really didn't, he just basically.
He left the content alone.
Oh, he left it alone pretty much. He made suggestions, and if I didn't like the suggestions, he would just leave it alone. But he was helpful in terms of like getting it into the format that they had presented the others in, or something like that. But I presented the one thing that I really wanted that I couldn't do was to actually have the musical examples.
Right.
They were like, well, we don't have the rights and blah 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 blah. I was like, man, you really need the music for this because it's just the words are just not enough. But
Well, the thing is, that's why and I said it at our panel that we did. I'm gonna say it again, and I'm actually gonna speak to Christian and Loren about this. I really think we should have a series where musicians come in and play specific music that influenced them, that they want to share and talk
like
about
what we did, yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. I really think that that's important, and that you could do
It is important.
with this piece. You could actually do that.
Yeah, it is important. It is important. Yeah, and because people, a lot of people sent me emails afterwards, and then I would send them, links to the music privately and stuff like that, because they were like, man, I got to hear this, what you're talking about sounds incredible, blah, blah, blah. I was like, well, you have to hear the music because that's it's not me, it's the music, And so,
but wait. It's the music, but it's also your interpretation of the music and your take on it and how you pull that together, because this is a profound piece.
Well, that's the thing about humans is that 5 people could listen to Charlie Parker and hear 5 different things, And people don't realize, they say, well, yeah, because it's music and blah, blah, blah. It's not because it's music. 5 people can listen to Barack Obama and hear 5 different things. I mean, we all know this, right? It's like, the same speech and interpret it completely different ways.
Okay.
5 people can hear Malcolm X and hear 5 different things,
Right.
So this doesn't just, with music, it's, maybe a little bit more extreme. But this happens with words.
Okay.
People have misunderstandings between husband and wife and stuff all the time.
Right.
I mean, they're not on the same wavelength or whatever. And that's just because you have something that's in you that's kind of like a filter. Your experience, everything you are, everything you raised, and everything goes through that filter,
Right.
and it gets interpreted a certain way. And your filter and my filter is not the same filter.
Right.
I mean, I don't care how close we are. Or, me and my brothers were brought up the same way. We don't have the same filter.
Right.
And so that gets even more so when you get out in the general population and everything.
Right.
Different people have different filters. So whatever you hear, what I'm saying right now, everybody's hearing something different. Everybody's interpreting something different. Some people might not be hearing me at all. They might be falling asleep. There's all, some people are like, I got to get home. This cat's just talking. It's like, I mean, there's all kind of things,
Right.
But I mean, like Graham knows me well. So he might be hearing something, I mean, not might be, he is hearing something totally different because it's mixed in with all that stuff we did together and everything, there's all these associations and things like that. So when I'm listening to this music, it's, what I'm saying is part Charlie Parker is part me.
Of course.
In terms of how I see that and everything.
Right.
So there may be some people that read that just like you think it's profound, and somebody else read it and say, man, this is some BS.
Right.
This cat, he's way off.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, some people,
Yeah, that's true.
right? Like Branford Marcellus called me up and said, man, that's the most profound stuff I ever read ever. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know whether, he says, because sometimes he just says things. And then somebody else, you might hang up the phone and say, man, that was...
No, it's doubtful.
And then somebody else might say, man, this cat's way off.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
The stuff he's talking about, ain't none of that there.
Right.
Whatever. I talk about clave a lot in that piece, and I talk about Charlie Parker in relation to clave and stuff like that. I've always heard that, in Bird's music. I've always heard, I used to talk to Billy Hart about that and everything. He's heard it, But some people you talk to, and they were like, clave, what you talking
Well,
about?
listen, man, there was Michael James was Duke Ellington's nephew, Ruth Ellington's son, very close to Albert Murray. We were real tight. And he told me that there is a video of Dizzy Gillespie at one of the Newport Jazz Festivals talking about Bird in relation to the Holiness Church and the rhythms of the Holiness Church.
Right.
Where
These called sanctified rhythms.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Dizzy mentioned that. Yeah.
Okay, so is that something, not necessarily related to the clave, but is that something that is connected in some way?
Well, that's how Dizzy heard it.
Right. And that's how his filter took it.
Yeah. I hear that too. I hear the church thing, and because the blues in the church is related.
Right.
Secular, it's related anyway. But in particular, because a lot of people talk about this music being related to Africa, right? But when they talk about it, most of the elements they talk about are like you could say the European elements in a sense, you know. I mean, because the words, the nomenclature, that's what they have words for that. We have words for triads and scales and chords and stuff like that. There's rhythms. You don't have any words for that kind of thing. It's a whole other vocabulary.
So you actually end up coining some phrases and actually reinterpreting certain things in the piece, right? But in your own.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of
that's some of the stuff that I think is very innovative.
A lot of it comes from the way we talk to the musicians talk to each other, because we used to identify this stuff when we heard it.
Okay.
I mean, holes, backpedaling rhythms, things like that. We hear Vaughn and those guys play that stuff, and then we'd have to, we just usually with some kind of analogy to something in life, just in life.
But man, see, this is not just because it's profound in and of itself. I think this is crucial because when you're talking about a discourse, you're talking about a flow of ideas and writings about this music that, for the most part, has been controlled by non-musicians.
Right.
And
scholars and people like that.
Right. Mm-hmm. So you're talking
the Cats
about,
didn't write hardly anything. You won't find anything written by Bird, by Train, by Monk. And these are the people who created the music. And you won't find anything written by them.
See, that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying this is actually radical. It's kind of revolutionary because it's important to have the musicians themselves to interpret in words, even though it's coming through your own individual filter. And you might have another musician who sees it a different way, but just to have that, and then you give the writers, the critics, the scholars, something to...
Still.
Huh? No, I'm saying you... No, I'm saying you give them something to like work from and maybe get closer to what they, because look, they have good intentions. They love the music.
I mean, you have when like, for example, liner notes. Give you an example. Most of the liner notes I read, they're poetic. Right. To put it mildly.
That was one of the points you made at that panel, right?
Yeah. So they have this flowery language about, because that's what they do. And also a lot of writers figure that that's the level that the regular people can deal with.
Right.
And they kind of talk down to people.
Right.
I think people are more intelligent than that, and I think that there's always analogies you can use to draw somebody in. You know, just regular analogies. You know, I mean,
And metaphors.
When I give workshops, I talk about, well, you know, somebody might want to ask about like different kinds of paths or different kind of harmonic path or rhythmic path. I say, well, you know, it's like I want to go home, right? And I'm going down 7th Avenue, and you go down 8th Avenue, and you might go and stop by the store. I use analogies like that, you know. I mean, and then people say, oh, okay, I see what you mean. I was like, well, it's just like that in the music. You know, you have different ways you can go, and different choices you can make, but you still get to the same destination. You know, I mean, you can say, well, I'll meet you over here, but I got to go here first. You know. And so somebody else got to go that way. You might go that way, and you know, roundabout, and you meet. And a lot of that happens in the music. That happened with McCoy and Train for a lot. You know, I mean, like during that period in '62, '63, around in there. You know, Train would go one way. You know, McCoy would go another way. You know, I mean, and the ways were compatible, meaning they were harmonious in a sense. They knew. I mean, there's a lot of details in it. I'm being very basic. You know, but they would they had these certain meeting points. You know, see certain points where they would, you know, and then they would launch off again to different points, and then they would meet and then launch off again. You know, and it was like a series of you know, trampoline jumps or whatever. You know,
right.
I mean, but they would be going different paths and stuff like that. And then the music you hear is like the result of these different paths that are happening. You know, but they knew what they were doing. Not necessarily that they knew what the other guy was doing, because I talked to McCoy once, and I asked him in this Japanese restaurant downtown. I was like, "Did you know what Train was doing?" He said, "Nope." I mean, he just, you know, he didn't hesitate. You know, he said, "I know what he's not doing, but I," you know, he said, "But my approach to that music was, you know, I intuitively figured out what worked with what they were doing." He said, "But in the beginning, I just laid out because I didn't know what they were doing, you know, and listened." You know, which was good, because the last cat Train used got fired for trying to follow Train. You know, I mean, Steve Coleman, I think it was.
Okay.
You know, and so you know, first thing McCoy did was smart. He just laid out, and he told me, he said, "Cats thought I was laying out to be cool." He said, "I was laying out because I didn't know what was happening." You know, I mean, you know, and then as it gets later and later toward the '64 and '60, you know, transition in some of those records, you hear he's playing like more and more. You know, I mean, and so he figured out the vibe, you know. And there's a lot of ways that he hooks up with Elvin rhythmically and stuff like that. You know, there's a lot of things that they do. And they figured out a lot of devices, and, you know, you figure out what works. It's like what Thad says, trial and error.
Right.
You know, now you got to have a talent to do that.
Right. And
Train has to pick the right cat that can do that and all of that, you know. But I mean, but then you sort of have to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And in the course of that figuring out, that's what people hear as a style. You know, that all that experimentation, everything. People hear that and they say, "Oh, that's this or that's that." And in the beginning, they didn't have a name for it. You know, so they would call it anything, anti-jazz or whatever. You know? I mean.
Okay, my last question is: tell us the title of your latest recording that just came out on Pi Records. Right. Title of it, and I downloaded it recently. And
legally, right?
Yeah. Oh, I went right. I was on Pi. Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And you know, it's hard to describe because so many different things I felt, and I know you were telling me yesterday. You know, some people see shapes, colors when they hear your music, that kind of thing.
Right.
I want to know what you were looking at. I mean, the way I describe it as like being like in and out simultaneously, you know, because there's so many cross things happening on various levels, but the groove is always there. That's one of the things I like about it.
Well, I have a hard time looking at individual albums and isolating them like that.
Because it's part of a continuum. Your music is part of a continuum.
Exactly. For me, it's just one big long thing.
Okay.
You know? And the albums are like snapshots. You know? And it's sort of like somebody takes a picture of you, and then take another picture of you, they take another picture of you, and they might say, well, you know, that looks just like Greg. This one don't really look like Greg, but now that's Greg. You know, I mean, you know, they might have these different things, you know, but really it's all you.
Right.
But you know, there's some things that for that person might be typical to you. Somebody else might say, no, it's not that one. This is the one that looks more, you know. I mean, because different people see different things in you, and none of them may sound like you. I'm sure it's happened to you that somebody will come up to you and say, "Man, this cat looks just like you," and you look at the cat and you say,
"Right.
Cat don't look nothing like you."
Right.
You know what I mean? You know, but for that person,
right,
you know, because that's their vision of you. So I mean, for me, the records are just like documentation of a certain period, even a certain day. Sometimes a certain day or a couple of days and everything, and that's how I see it. But in general, what I was trying to say with this album is
what's the title again?
Harvesting Semblances and Affinities. Yeah, this is a little out there. That part is out there. But but what I'm trying to say is that I'm trying to use the music. No, let me go a different way. That's not gonna work. Every time has a feeling to it. Like this moment that we're in this room, it has a certain feeling.
Right.
You know, a unique feeling. That once we leave this room, I mean, and the feeling is being contributed by everybody, even people not saying nothing. You know, the vibration is all from everybody in this room. Everything that's happening, the bright lights that's killing me, you know, the air conditioning. You know, I mean, all of this stuff is part of this feeling. You know.
Right.
And so when we leave this room, it breaks up and everybody has, you know, something different that's happening. But while we're in this room, there's a certain vibe that's here. Now, for some people, there may be something profound happening right now. For others, it's just another day, you know, nothing and everything. Like I mentioned the time I went to dinner with Max Roach. I'll always remember that. One night, but I always remember it. You know, it had a very special feeling to me. You know, the time I met Abby Lincoln, it's a very special feeling, you know. So some things, you know, everybody has these moments that are like special to them, that stick out. But what it means is that every moment has something special. Some of them, you can't retain everything. Some of it sticks out more than others and everything. So my interest is to capture these feelings through music, you know. And so that's what I mean by the harvesting part. Like you harvest, harvest, you know. Yeah. And you can probably figure it out right now, but semblances and affinities, you know. I mean, I'm trying to harvest these things. Now, the methods I use, we didn't talk about the esoteric stuff and everything, but there's astrology and all kinds of other things involved and everything.
And like numbers and
all of that. Music and numbers are connected anyway.
Right.
Even if you're not particularly esoteric, you gotta go past the numbers.
Right.
I mean, you know, that's in there in some kind of way, and whether you deal directly with it consciously or not, it's still there. I mean, it's there in the structure of the music. You know what I'm saying, and the scales and everything, and just in the way the instruments are built and all that. You can't avoid that. You know, some people deal with it more in a conscious way, like Coltrane did, and others don't. You know, but it's there. Right. You know, so that part, there's nothing new about that. But what I do is I use different kinds of symbolic arts. You know, I call astrology a symbolic art, for example. Poetry is another. You know, there's different things. I use different kinds of symbolic arts in order to pull the analogies together. And I mentioned about the music being symbols. You know, so music is really just sound shapes. You know, in a sense. You know, and a symbol is just a shape. You know, so you're kind of sculpturing the sound in a certain way. You know, and we have basically two elements to what we do. There's the composition part, or the preconceived composition part, and there's a spontaneous composition part, what most people call improvisation. We have those two means in which to sculpt this sound. And we do it in such a way that most people can't tell the difference between what's preconceived and what's spontaneous, because that's, you know, we try to blend all that together.
I find that
where it's one sound.
I'm sorry, bro. I find that in Wayne Shorter's music.
Yeah. Wayne's the cat.
Okay.
You know, I mean, he's the cat. I mean, he has like a serious talent with this, you know, with the pen and everything, you know. But then, you know, he has that, you know, he has what all those other great cats had, the spontaneous part, you know. And it's all blended together. I mean, usually there's hints, like when you see a whole bunch of people playing something that's in unison or something like that, you can tell that that's usually composed, you know, or whatever. But we try to blur that because, I mean, there's a lot of polyphony and all this kind of stuff and a lot of movement and everything. And it's the movement itself are the shapes, and we're trying to make certain shapes to symbolize certain things. Not that we expect everybody to see that, but they would get the vibration, you know, the feeling, you know. And you learn that from, like I said, from Abby and from all those people in the past. They did that in different ways with their music. You know, they were able to tell stories, you know, and you watch them and you see how they move things and how they can move people and all of that just with sound, you know, and with gesture, you know, through sound. And so, you know, we try to do the same things, but I'm really interested in this capturing the feeling of a particular time, a particular moment. That's why some of the tunes have dates and things like that. Okay. You know, because they like, you know, designed to capture a particular moment or whatever. So that album is part of that. There's actually 3, 4, 5 albums that could probably be in that thing, including one that's unreleased, you know, that are probably in that line. But that's kind of what that's about, is about these capturing these moments and sort of freezing them in sonic shapes in the music and stuff like that, you know. I mean, that may sound like a lot of mumbo jumbo.
No, man. I mean, look, there have been some philosophers of art, one named Suzanne Langer, who has a whole philosophical...
How you spell her last name?
Langer.
Okay.
Suzanne, Susanne.
AA, 2 A's.
Suzanne. Right.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Okay. You know her?
No,
You
no,
know
no,
her? Oh,
no,
okay.
just tripping off the name.
Okay. So she was very influenced by Ernest Cassirer, who's one of the pioneers of looking at the symbolic aspects of culture.
Mm-hmm.
Her whole theory can be summed up by saying that she looks at art as feeling in form.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Because see, that's the human element. That's what I'm talking about. If you, I mean, that's us. I mean, we can call it something. You can call it feeling or whatever. But what are we talking about? We're not talking about the feeling of ants. You know.
That's right.
I mean, we're talking about us.
That's
you know.
right.
And so in the end, it all comes back to us. And so to me, it's about trying to know yourself, or humans. Put it this way: the human. You know, as much as you can, and then how you can express that. You know?
Okay. All right. Now. Okay. I promise. I apologize for not getting to you all sooner. On the tape, we only have about 5 minutes. We're going to take about 10 minutes. I'm going to ask you all to be as brief as you can. I'm going to ask you to try to be as direct as you can in your response, so we can try to get folks to. I'd like you to raise your hand if you have a question.
We're gonna have
Quick
trouble
comment.
seeing them.
Yeah, but let's see. Raise your hand or just speak. Say your name and.
Can they
call
turn the
out your
light up a
question.
little bit?
Does the light have a gradation or is it on or off?
Sorry, we can turn it on.
Okay. Could someone turn the light on, please?
Yeah, somebody's hands up in the back. I see them.
Okay. Yes. Oh, what?
Steve, did you think that George Lewis's book was an accurate representation of what he thought they would do?
You talking about the AACM?
Yeah.
George Lewis's book.
Did I think it was an accurate?
representation?
Of what he thought the period that he was involved in capturing.
Yeah, I thought he. I mean, it was mostly. I don't think he concentrated that much on the music. You know, he concentrated mostly on like the interactions between the people and what was happening and everything. But yeah, I mean, the thing is that it's such a complex period and there's so much happening that yes, I feel like it was accurate, but it was a part of, it was just. I mean, you can't write everything in a book; it's impossible, But there was a lot of incredible stuff that he got together because of his access. Because he's in the organization and he had access to talk. I mean, Muha and those guys wouldn't even open up to most people.
Outside.
Yeah, exactly. So because he was, it's like what you were talking about. Because it's the insider talking, he's going to talk about angles that we would have never gotten from. People felt comfortable opening up to him. All those cats in Chicago, even some of the cats like Phil Coran and all these guys who were like around that situation. They feel like they're talking to one of them, in a sense. So that's always going to be very, very different. It's like Arthur Taylor's book, Notes and Tones. The same kind of thing. That's always going to be very, very different. Those were the books that I focused on, by the way, when I came up. I mean, I always liked any book that was like a musician had something to do with, like Dizzy's book, To Be About Not the Bop or whatever, and anything like that involved the musicians in some kind of way, Notes and Tones, all those books. To me, those were very, very important because when you listen to like Betty Carter and all those people speak in those books, they're talking in a very different way because they're talking to a peer, and so things open up in quite a different way than if they were just doing a downbeat interview.
All right.
So yeah, the answer to make it short.
All right. Another question. Raise your hand, please. Yes.
My name's Gilad. I'm curious.
What's your name?
Gilad.
Okay. Gilad.
I guess
Like the poet.
the poet. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a Gilad poet.
How did you decide to make some of your music available? Like some of the albums are available for download for free.
Yeah, well that's I mean, I wrote have you read my long thing about that?
Oh no, I guess I can.
Yeah, that's I get asked that question all the time, so I posted a thing.
Okay.
Saying why I did this, it's right next to it. You can see it, and it
On your site?
on my site. On
What's
my
your
website.
site?
Yeah, www.m-base.com or m-base.com. But you can just Google my name and saxophone. There's a lot of Steve Coleman, so you have to watch out. There's a lot of imposters out there. but you can. It's a very common name, so if you put saxophone, it'll come up. And right at the same place where I'm giving away the music, I put a note, why I'm doing that. But basically, it's just that I believe that there should be a Creative Commons,
Creative what?
Commons. That there should be a common area that creativity can be shared that doesn't cost anything. I've always believed that. I don't think everything should cost something. So that's my belief. But I'm at complete odds with the music industry. Trust me on this one. And I've been chewed out many a time by many musicians about the same question. But that's just my point of view. I think that everything shouldn't cost money. And I really don't think that ideas should be something that somebody owns. That's my personal opinion. Of course, I'm quite alone in this.
Yes.
My name is Reggie. Quick question. What do you think was, looking back over your career, what would you say was one of the best decisions that you made as far as just whether it be direction or...
Well, I mean, like I mentioned, I've always been a hard-headed cat. So even when I was playing on the floor with Army men, I wanted to play the games I wanted to play, and not just let other kids, how kids do, oh, you're a chicken or sissy, they try to get you to do what you want to, I wouldn't fall for any of that.
Okay.
So I mean, I remember when I first moved to New York, my mother was really worried about me because I didn't have any money. I didn't know anybody in New York, and she was like, well, what happens if you don't make it? And I told her, I was like, just me deciding to go, I've already made it, and so that's how I look at it. It's like from the moment you decide that you're going to do follow your own muse or whatever you want to call it, your own direction, and do what you want to do, it's just a matter of staying on that path, no matter what it is. I mean, I think that most people are not doing what they want to do, but a lot of it's a matter of courage or whatever. But that was, for me, that's the most important thing is deciding that I'm going to follow the path that I want to follow and then stick to it no matter what, which is easier said than done,
But you followed your passion, or as Joseph Campbell would say, followed your bliss.
Yeah, Joseph Campbell, that's a good, that's a good thing. Yeah, but I mean, and it's just, you mentioned Sonny Rollins. To me, that's what he did. I mean, and that's the example I get from those people. That's the example I get from Monk or Sonny Rollins or Beethoven or whoever. The example I get is from them is that they followed, that inner voice. And they had the courage to keep, it's just a matter of courage a lot of times, but they just had the courage to keep following no matter what. And these people, like Fats Navarro said, I'm going to do this music or I'm going to die trying. He did both. So I mean, but see, you're going to die anyway.
Right.
So I mean, so I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's like, you're going to do one of them, or are you going to do the other?
Okay. All right. Yes.
My name is Andreas. What grabs you right now musically? What inspires,
You mean, what do I listen to?
Yeah, or no, what I mean, it's like, I think in every period as a musician, there are certain things, where it's right now very important. Shedding wise, or, new music you listen to where you're like, wow, that grabs me, or that's cool, where,
Yeah.
what is right now
In every
for you the
every
big
week
thing?
there's something different.
Right. Yeah.
If you want to know about this week, there's a cat named Pascal Dusapin, whose music I'm listening to. But I mean, this is, I don't want to make it sound like, that's the most important thing in my life. That's just, that's the question you asked, I mean, but, last week it might be Bud Powell. Next week it might be, Akon music from Ghana. I mean, it's different things, different phases you're in, and everything. But I'm trying to figure out certain kind of movement things. So I'm listening to something right now just to, see examples of that. But usually the examples I listen to are far away from the music I do personally. I mean, they're like a lot of times from other cultures. I would consider that far away because this cat's like a European, you guys would call him classical, composer. I just say composer, but I'm living in France, but he's about my age, maybe a year older than me or something like that. And I just came back from Paris visiting him, and talked to him, asked him questions and stuff like that about his music and everything. I do that kind of thing a lot too. I get together with people. I might go to the south of India and get together with somebody and ask them, and so I go through these different phases like that. And I like getting information directly from people if I can, if they're still alive, And so the last guy from Europe I did that with was this guy, Pierre Norgard, who lives in Denmark. He's another composer. And that was a year ago or so, But I try to do a lot of that, get together with people from really different disciplines and talk to them and see what information I can get or whatever, you know. But then I know I'm going to use it like completely different than the way they use it because we're in different areas, you know. But I mean, it's all over the map. It's hard to answer that question, you know, because I'm listening to a lot of stuff. I always listen to the stuff that it has influenced me from the past, you know, the Sonny Rollins and all those guys. That stuff's always there. But then there's additional stuff coming in from different places, you know. So I don't know if I satisfactorily. It's a hard question because
But
I
you
listen to a
answered
lot
it.
of different stuff.
Yeah,
Huh?
you answered it.
Yeah.
One more. Yes.
You don't mind me asking, what do you do when the horn goes down and when just for leisure outside of music?
Well, there's not a lot of leisure because a lot of the things I do relate to music anyway. Like, for example, I'm really into boxing, but you probably saw that article I did on Floyd Mayweather and music. Did you see that?
No.
No, okay. Okay. Right.
Is it on your site?
It's on my site, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I relate boxing to music, but I relate everything to music. So it's not, you know,
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
so I mean, I could be swimming and, you know.
I think Matthew Shipp has a similar analogy.
Yeah, he does. He does. You know. But I get pretty technical.